What's the worst monster you've ever had for a neighbor? When my wife and I moved into our house in the summer of 2019, the neighbors on either side of us warned us about the people renting the house directly behind ours. Apparently, they'd been known to cause trouble and blow things way out of proportion, bordering on paranoia of everyone around them. We kept it in mind but had no issues for the first 6 months or so after moving in. Their house sits on a hill behind ours and so overlooks the majority of our backyard due to the elevation change. Well, one night, or morning technically, at about 3 a.m., we wake up to ring notifications from our phones showing video from our front doorbell. There's a man standing barefoot in a sleeveless shirt on our porch pounding on our front door. We give it 2 to 3 minutes of just watching him on the app thinking maybe he's drunk and has the wrong house, essentially giving him the benefit of the doubt. But then we start to hear him say, "Come out, you frickin' prevert, I'm gonna F you up," etc. And then he leaves the porch and starts to head around the side of the house towards our backyard. Considering we had no idea who this was, my wife now immediately calls the cops as I move out of our bedroom towards the external doors to look and listen for any attempt at a home invasion. At this point, our neighbors directly behind us throw a huge spotlight onto our backyard from theirs. We're thinking, okay, cool, they know something's up and they're trying to help us out by shedding light on our backyard. The cops arrive several long minutes later and knock, we explain the situation and they head out back to look around and get the scoop from the neighbors with the spotlight. It turns out that the spotlight neighbor was the one on our porch. He'd jumped our fence into our backyard and up into his yard and then threw the light on. He told the police that several nights prior I'd let my puppy out onto my own backyard in the middle of the night, and because I was in my boxers, that I was trying to expose myself to his family, because they could look down onto our entire yard from where theirs sits. He then followed this up to the police with evidence which consisted of videos he'd taken through our windows of my wife and I inside our own home, doing totally normal things like chores and watching TV. Nothing inappropriate or scandalous, not that it would have mattered anyway because we were in our own home. Because of the elevation difference, if they went out of their way they could technically slightly see through our closed blinds due to the angle. So they'd been filming us for no reason at all and expected the police to see this as reasonable. The cops came back in and my wife was devastated. It was a huge breach of our privacy, of course, and totally unfounded accusations as we'd never done anything to anger these people. We hadn't even met them. The police told us, just don't worry about it, if he tries something again, just give us a call, which wasn't the most comforting at the time. They moved out a few months later without any additional issues. My wife and I celebrated like it was a holiday when we saw the moving van in their driveway. I assume we'll have many more extended neighbor wars in the series to come, but this is for sure a very brief and spirited encounter with these crazies that clearly made you uncomfortable right up until they did you the favor of getting out of there. Lived in a small apartment and my neighbors always cranked up their music to 11, like loud. And until something like 7 a.m. Maybe it went later than that, but that's when I'd leave for work anyway. It was so loud that I couldn't hear my own TV over it. My neighbors and I would bang on the door, but they'd never open it. It was like trying to sleep at a festival. Then at some point, I found out that they often left for a bar across the street, but would just leave the music on. So I'd pull the breaker for their apartment, but they would just come back at 5 a.m. and turn it right back on. It was reported by heaps of people, but nothing was ever done. So at some point, I'd jam their lock when they went out so their keys wouldn't work anymore, and they had to get the property manager in while the music was blasting inside. After a couple of times of that happening, they were evicted. Maybe I'm the bad neighbor in this story. This is the definition of chaotic good. Their dogs got into my backyard and attacked my dog. My dog ended up okay, but it was a long recovery and he still doesn't walk right. He was and is the happiest dog ever, so to see him on the ground covered in blood was the worst thing ever. The dogs were able to get through because their kids had taken a plank out of my fence. They didn't have a fence. I left a letter on their door explaining the situation. They showed up at my door to tell me that it was my fault for not having a stronger fence, and that they wouldn't be paying any medical bills. After a lot of them yelling and me calmly explaining why they would actually be paying, they eventually complied. They did build a fence backwards with the flat side facing them. They're also loud as F, have chickens that escape on a regular basis in our suburban neighborhood, and are overall scummy people. When I started my first job post-college, I was thrilled to live by myself for the first time in my life. I had this beautiful one-bedroom apartment in a solid part of town. Everything was great until 6 months later when new tenants moved in next to my unit. I had a package go missing, a phone case. Amazon had posted a photo of it at my door, so I thought that it was just a fluke. Then it happened again, and again, and again. The office wouldn't accept packages, so I had to get my items delivered to my friends' places instead. Overall, wildly inconvenient, and the police didn't care in the slightest when I reported it, so I just figured I'd deal with it. Fast forward a few weeks, and I came home after being gone for less than an hour to see that my doorknob and front door were scraped up and the knob was barely hanging on. Long story short, I'd been parking in plain view of this guy's window, so he was able to tell when I was home. I'm 100% convinced he tried to break into my place, and that me coming home early interrupted him. I googled his name after I moved, I got it off a package at his door, and I found out he was a convicted felon with charges that included grand theft auto, domestic attacks, substance dealing, and an attempted break-in. Apartment building. The upstairs neighbor's dog peed on their patio and it dripped down onto me while I was sitting outside reading them. I yelled and ran in to shower, and when I texted them to ask them to take their dog out to pee in the future, they said it wasn't their dog, and it must have blown in from somewhere else? What? My worst neighbors were definitely the crap-bag 19-year-olds that lived next door to me when I was finishing up college that screamed at Call of Duty at the top of their lungs through paper-thin walls every night when they got killed, and who also threw a pumpkin on the roof of my car, causing $3,000 worth of damage, which is considered felony vandalism in Michigan. I finally got them to confess and basically gave them a stern talking to as a 22-year-old that was just done with college nonsense at that point, and told him I wasn't going to press charges as long as his insurance paid for it. Later that year, when his roommate was flipping out about Call of Duty and yelled something along the lines of, "God damn it, frickin' hackers, everyone's frickin' cheating, what the frick is this bullcrap? I hate this game so much, bunch of frickin' losers and cheaters," which was very clear through my bedroom wall while I was studying, I didn't hesitate, since it had been months of this. After he got done with his tantrum, I shouted back, "Sounds like you just suck at card, bro." I heard a crash of what sounded like a controller being banished to the Shadow Realm, and then didn't hear anything from him for about a month. It was glorious. Yeah, when I play with people who are cheating, I quit and report them. This was almost definitely a skill issue. If they're playing that often and still suck that badly, it's time to adopt a more accepting nature in defeat. Or just switch to single-player games. That's what the rest of us trash-tier gamers do. Oh, I have a few stories from the same neighbor who I'll call Linda. Linda would often have men outside the apartment building that she locked out, screaming her name. But the best story regards a boyfriend Linda had who insisted my roommate and I call him the Captain. About a week after meeting him, we came home to a wedding announcement for Linda and the Captain. Yes, his name was the Captain on the announcement. Exactly 1 week after that announcement, the Captain was arrested outside our apartment building for public intoxication at 2 a.m. while screaming, "I've made a huge mistake! F you, Linda! I'm ruined!" We rented a house that had another apartment in the basement. The lady who lived below us kept to herself for the most part, so we didn't see her much. Part of our rental was a detached garage, and she asked if she could put a small deep freezer in our garage. We were using it for storage, so we were fine with it. After a couple of weeks of having her freezer in there, it somehow got unplugged and she came unglued on us and wanted us to pay to replace everything. I understood her frustration, but we hardly ever went into the garage since it was only for storage. In other words, we definitely didn't unplug it and our landlord agreed. But she was mad. She had a son in college who came home for the summer. During that same summer, he found a cat and brought it home. His mum said no cats inside, so he'd feed the kitten outside. She was pretty wild. He left for school again in the fall and we noticed that the cat was getting very thin. We started feeding her outside in the usual spot. Around Christmas, we bought a bag of cat food and I made a plate of cookies and left them both at our neighbor's front door. The next day, they were both back on our porch. Rude, but whatever. We continued to feed the cat because she obviously wasn't feeding her. A few weeks later, the cat came to our door crying. She was trying to come inside. Super weird considering she was pretty wild and we'd never let her inside before. I let her in and noticed she was pregnant and for sure about to have babies. I made her a little corner and she had the babies the next day. We let her stay in the house with us, but we knew we couldn't keep her. I went downstairs to talk to the neighbor. She said that her son's cat was a boy, so the cat obviously wasn't his. I posted on Facebook to see if anyone was interested in fostering a cat and her kittens because we couldn't keep her. Her son saw my post on Facebook and got super mad at his mum. She then called the cops and said that I stole her cat and lied to her when she confronted me about having the cat in my possession. The police called animal control, who then contacted us. They asked us to take the cat and her kittens to the shelter so that if our neighbor really wanted the cats, she'd have to pay the fee as well as get her vaccinated and licensed. We did take them to the shelter, and as far as I know, she did pay the fees to pick her up. However, I did see her on the animal shelter's Facebook adoption page not long after that. Poor baby. For the record, I was heartbroken to have to take her into the shelter. I felt awful for moving her and her babies around like that. I'm sure that she was so anxious and scared. We would have tried to keep her, but we were moving to a new place that same week, hence the urgency to find her a foster home. And we weren't allowed to have pets. All authorities involved thought that she was nuts, and I think they were also frustrated to have to deal with this stupid situation. It was the stupidest, most infuriating thing that ever happened to me as far as neighbors go. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We had some neighbors that used to leave their garbage out in plastic bags the night before garbage day instead of leaving out bins. Around here, that's just ringing the dinner bell for raccoons and other critters. Sure enough, come morning, there's garbage strewn all over the neighborhood. What the raccoons and skunks didn't spread around, the wind picked up the slack. Some people on the street kindly approached the guy and asked him to put his garbage in a bin. He told them to go F themselves, and thus began garbage wars. Every morning of garbage day, some people on my street would collect all the half-eaten and rotten trash from their lawns and toss it back onto the guy's backyard. He'd collect it and then dump it back on their lawns, or cram it into their bushes. People started finding half-eaten burritos and candy wrappers in their mailboxes. The street just started to look like a slum. The police were called, health inspectors, city bylaw enforcement. Each side was calling in whatever authority they could muster to get their enemy in the crap. This guy and his family, amazingly his wife seemed perfectly pleasant, lasted about 8 months and then moved. Every once in a while I find a random margarine lid or piece of styrofoam in my hedge, and my mind goes back to those dark days of the war. I lived in an apartment with lots of rotating tenants. An elderly lady moved in across the hall from me and promptly started hoarding. I started to figure it out when her deck and porch started to fill up with odds and ends furniture, including but not limited to a roll-top desk. She also yelled at me once for taking her key out of the front door and putting it in the mail slot. Anyway, after a couple of weeks, I started to realize I hadn't seen her in a while and started to smell something really weird. Turns out she had passed away and no one knew about it for a week, hence the smell. Her family came and cleared out all of her stuff about a week afterwards. This is Wisconsin in the winter, and I had my good Doc Marten work boots outside my door because they were wet. They used one of my boots to prop open their door while they moved out and then stole them when they were done. Yeah, sadly, this is a thing that you hear about being fairly commonplace with elderly hoarders. One day, those towers of stuff fall down and the poor folks are trapped. Awful way to go. Also, trash move by the family, first leaving grandma alone to expire like that, and then just doing a little bit of extra theft on the way out. He lived in the apartment right below my husband and I. It went from constant complaints, to him calling the cops on us multiple times, to him leaving threatening messages on our car and front door. When we first moved in, he was upset with the landlord for renting above him, and left plenty of unpleasant notes and interrupted quite a few times when we were talking to the landlord. When we moved in, we only had a mattress and no other furniture, but he kept calling the landlord saying that we were moving furniture around at 2 a.m. and had our TV on at full blast. After the 8th complaint in 2 months about us still moving our furniture around and TV being too loud, we finally showed our apartment to the landlord. We literally didn't have a TV and still only had our mattress. Then the neighbor started leaving notes on our car, telling us to keep it down, and he even put it in writing, "There needs to be no noise after 10 p.m. or else I'll call the cops." We usually didn't even get home until after 11 p.m., and we were respectful to make sure that we kept things down because we knew that not everyone had our work schedule. So we tried keeping it down even more, and there were so many instances when we'd be eating our dinner or cuddling quietly or even sleeping, and then he'd be banging on his ceiling or our floor. After a few months, he started calling the cops, and it got to the point where even the cops told him to stop calling about a noise complaint because it's a landlord issue. And every time they came, they never heard anything. The last time they showed up, I was asleep, and my husband ended up talking to them and explaining everything. They suggested that we file a harassment complaint. Then the cops showed up at the coffee shop I worked at the time and explained that they were getting almost nightly calls and they suggested to me too that we should file a harassment complaint against the neighbor. Then he started leaving threatening notes on our car and front door, and we kept hearing our doorknob jiggling. He claimed that he and a friend had sat outside our apartment for 2 hours and listened to all the noise we were making, that he's a retired cop and would call in a few favors if we kept making noise. He knows where we park, so we'd better start parking it somewhere else if we don't want it to get damaged. We kept the notes and made copies for the landlord and let him know that this was what we were dealing with, so we're just keeping him in the loop before crap started getting real, aka, we're tired of this, and if an old guy gets his crap rocked, then just know that it's been a long time coming. The last complaint was when he ran outside to the landlord screaming that something needed to be done about us because he heard our bed squeak the night before, and how dare he rent to some crazy college kids who were partying and having wild group fun times in the bedroom all night. The landlord finally told him to F off and stop being a bitter old man. Then the neighbor took a total 180 and we found out he'd decided to sue the landlord and was moving. Suddenly the neighbor kept offering us rides when one of us were walking. He stopped complaining and leaving notes, but our doorknob kept jiggling and turning around at midnight, and whenever we'd check on our door, we'd hear someone running down the hall as we'd approach our door. He eventually moved away, and shockingly, we haven't gotten a complaint from any other neighbor in the last 3 years we've lived here. I rented a flat with an ex, and the upstairs neighbor was an absolute nightmare. Deadbeat dad who had his kid every weekend and left them screaming all the time. He'd blast music until sunrise every day, even when he had his kid. We got the council involved and nothing happened. Got child services involved. Nothing happened. He used to argue every Sunday with his ex about how he wasn't paying child support. They'd argue right outside our door when we were on the ground floor. The guy was unemployed, owed the landlord a lot of money, and only left his flat to get groceries or substances. He kicked off at me because my cat meowed loudly one time. Well, they were smackheads, plain and simple. They had 2 kids and were constantly physically and verbally rowing at each other and were hoarders on top of it. Tried calling Child Protective Services and the police over and over, and it was never taken seriously. They ended up burning down their apartment and caused thousands of dollars in damage to the rest of our apartment building because they were cooking crystal. We had to move out, as did so many others. The silver lining was that they finally got their kids taken away after that. This dude pretended to be a reverend but was actually just a filthy frickin' hoarder. He insisted on wearing sandals all of the time, and whenever he left his flat, the entire stairwell would stink of century-old unwashed feet. Eventually, the beetles that had infested his flat crawled up into our kitchen and then everywhere. It took months to get him evicted. Screw that guy. Had one that would basically steal our mail and other stuff from our porch and yard. Caught her once to confront her, and she started yelling at me to stop attacking her and tried to say I was stealing her stuff. Ended up with the police getting called and us filing a restraining order against her. How much space does a neighbor have to give you on a restraining order? I'm guessing they're not expected to have to move from parts of their house that are within the radius of said order. I've never known anyone to have one in real life. They're a strange concept to me. Moved into a crappy apartment in a building that was occupied by basically the worst people in the area. Pretty rural small town, junkies, alcoholics, and other interesting specimens. I moved there because I don't have a driver's license and I needed to live close to my new job at a cafe. There were no buses in the area except school buses, and it was relatively cheap to live there. Anyways, one night when I came home from work, I met 2 of my neighbors by the entrance to the building. These 2 were living wall to wall with me, and I'd listened to their substanced-up saturnalias more than once. They started following me up the stairs, not saying a single word, just following me. I rushed inside and locked the door, and then they started hammering at it. Yelling, hammering their hands at the door so hard I thought they'd break it. I yelled back at them, "What the frick do you want? Leave me alone." They stopped their hammering, and the man said with a fragile voice, "We were just wondering if we could borrow your pee for a substance test tomorrow." I not so politely declined and told them to F off and called the cops. Didn't live there for much longer, I'll tell you that. I used to live in a house that was split into 2 apartments. My neighbors had the lower half, and I learned we had issues with the HVAC when their cigarette smoke came visibly pouring out our registers, stank up everything we owned, and then one of them stole my car. My neighbors create this toxic smoke out of their chimney, which we suspect is them making illegal substances. Our neighbor was tossing bags of her upchuck into my yard for about a year, like 50 bags. I called the cops. Turns out she had an eating disorder and was hiding it from her parents. My neighbor once shot both of my dogs and his goat and made me bury both of them. One dog survived, thankfully. He then tried to make me pay for a new goat, claiming that our dogs attacked it. The goat had a bullet wound and no bite marks. I have a schizophrenic neighbor that has believed for years that I'm hacking his electronic devices, scanning his phone, harassing and terrorizing him. Over the years, he's claimed that I've held an old man hostage in my condo and allowed blood to drip from my patio to his, and that I'm a terrible racist. He leaves notes on the inside of his car accusing me of these things. This guy owned 6 cars and kept them all parked on the street in a very congested block of apartments. Spent hours tending to them, and they somehow always looked rustier when he was done. If a leaf landed on one of his cars, he'd accuse the neighborhood of intentionally placing leaves on his car to annoy him. My current neighbors will randomly light bombshell fireworks in the middle of the night during the middle of the week, as if some of us don't have to wake up early for work. Also, when I was younger and living in a different city, our front neighbors stole our dog from our backyard one day, and we didn't find out it was them until a few months later when we saw our dog in their yard. They denied they stole it and wouldn't give it back to us until we got the cops involved. What's the most awkward thing you've witnessed at a high school reunion? Not me, but my brother-in-law's high school reunion. A guy that was severely bullied in high school started a Facebook group to get the ball rolling on planning a high school reunion. He planned the venue, food, drinks, and asked everyone to pay a ticket price to cover it all. He organized the money to go into a provided bank account, received more than 200 people's dollary dues, and then effed off. Never to be heard of again. I've never laughed so hard in my life. My mum's 35th high school reunion was at a bar that I frequent quite a bit. I walked in with my mum and went up to a bartender that I know to order a drink for my mum and I. He looked up at my mother and I and immediately got super shy and weird and then said, "You're the daughter of," my mum's name. Apparently he'd had a huge crush on my mum in high school and my uncle beat the crap out of him because he creeped my mum out. It was very awkward indeed. I'm getting kind of a Peter Baelish Game of Thrones vibe. Did he creep on you or treat you different after that? I play in a band. We got booked by a restaurant for some class reunion. I showed up to set up for the gig and it was my frickin' class. I wasn't even invited. "Hey everyone, before we start, I'd like to dedicate this first song to my high school class with this message. Frick you and frick you twice for not inviting me to the class reunion. Also, frick you guys." I went to my wife's last reunion a few months ago. The day of the reunion, she got a call that it was cancelled. Apparently 5 years earlier, a classmate got creepy and stalkery with another classmate. The people organizing the reunion invited him to not show up. Then the guy posted on Facebook some vague threats. They did actually change the venue and have the reunion, but there were many people that couldn't be contacted with the updated info. Nothing. And by nothing, I mean the awkward feeling at being one of the 12 who showed up. Graduated in 1962 and never went to any of the reunions. Didn't even know about them until the 50th in 2012. I'd been in the odd places of the world. Encountered a classmate 50 years later. He gave me the roster. Most of the people who went had never left the small farm town. Of the people who could be tracked, over half the males were dead. Vietnam, substances, transmissible diseases, and all the random bullcrap. I was nobody in high school, but I still seemed to be on the green side of the dirt. My friend said her cousin's high school reunion was really awkward because this guy ran up and kissed his high school girlfriend without her asking, and then got in a fistfight with her husband. It didn't turn out well from what I hear. There has to be a balance between boring evening and fistfights and drunken disasters. I'm so glad the latter are so present here for our entertainment. 2 of our classmates passed away before our 5-year reunion. One of the girls organizing the event thought it would be a good idea to make cardboard cutouts of their faces as if they were truly still here with us. The worst part was that people got drunk and started toting them around, taking pictures with them. It was messed up. A guy from our class passed away from cancer shortly before our 20th reunion. He was never super popular but was pretty well known across our class. During the awards and speech section of the night, the lady, our class president I think, was trying to get the crowd to settle down for a moment of silence. You could tell it meant a lot to her as she was starting to get heated. The crowd started shushing one another, and it got just quiet enough to hear somebody say, "Geez, did somebody die or something?" When I was about 6, I went to my dad's small-town school's 30-year reunion. His ex-fiancée, not my mum, was dressed in her prom dress and kept talking to me, saying she should have been my mummy. Even then, I knew that was weird. Keep your crazy inside, lady. 10-year reunion held at a bar owned by a former classmate. Started at 10 p.m. The owner told people adults over 21 only. People said they needed to bring their kids and were told no. Several people brought their babies and toddlers anyway. Parents drank like teenagers and the kids ran wild. Owner called the cops, who watched the parents be negligent. Parents escorted out by same cops and their kids were taken out by others. For some clarification, original reunion was going to be at our high school, but less than 20 people bought tickets, so it was cancelled. A lot of us live not too far and see each other out and about anyway. We had a Facebook group up for the event, so when it was cancelled, the bar owner agreed to have something at his place, but we had to follow the law since it was a bar and not a restaurant, like no one under 21. He did ask people to leave with their kids and was cursed out. I heard one girl spat on him, so he called the cops. One of my friends, who was an organizer for the original event, tried watching the kids and she pointed out their parents to the cops when they arrived. The classmates were really drunk to the point they couldn't have driven their kids home, and others were belligerent. Hence the arrests. I was there with a friend when he saw his ex. They approached each other, him going in for a hug and her extending her hand to shake. When they each realized what the other was doing, she put her arms out for a hug and he extended his hand to shake. By the time they touched, it was just a jumble of hands and arms weirdly touching each other. He started by saying, "So, how have you been?" And I just said, excuse me, and got the heck away from that. A girl I like, we work at different facilities but hang out a lot at trainings, came down for an audit. She introduced me to someone she's training and we talk for a bit until they have to leave. She invites me to join all of them for dinner and I say cool. I go for a hug and she sticks her hand out and we both sort of back up and flip our actions, so I stick my hand out and she goes for the hug. We hug and it was awkward. That night at dinner, we're joking, we all have a few drinks and I excuse myself for the night. She stands up from the table and her arms start to open up, but I instinctively reach out to shake her hand. The guy she's training has a huge grin as she turns red in the face, shakes my hand and says goodnight. At my 10-year high school reunion, a guy I hated and who hated me showed up and came directly towards me. Not saying anything at all to me, he then engaged the person standing right next to me on my left. He proceeded to move around the room talking to literally everyone there, only 33 people in my class, and stopping with the person on my right. Didn't so much as acknowledge my existence the whole rest of the day. It was super weird at the time, but many years later it was the most memorable thing that happened. I laugh about it now. At my 10th, the organizers gave awards to people for various reasons. One girl from our class was given an award for having the most kids of anyone there. She had had 4 by different guys, which was part of the announcement. The look on her face as she slinked up to the podium said it all. At mine, someone made a speech along the lines of, "To all those that felt picked on or bullied, I have something to say to you." She then started to sing Let It Go from Frozen. A kid in my class, 1982, was hit by a car during our junior year and wound up in a persistent vegetative state. We had heard bits and pieces of information about him over the years, but none of it sounded reliable. He was dead, he was still in a coma, he'd come out of it, he was normal, he'd become a born-again Christian, he lived at home and couldn't do anything for himself. You name it, we had heard it. Every reunion, there's still some misinformation being passed around about the guy. In our 10-year reunion program, he was in the in memoriam page. Then it was pointed out that he wasn't dead. Last fall we had our 35th reunion and he was announced along with the "Let's take a minute to remember our departed classmates," and then others pointed out that they thought he was still alive and living in Florida now. I don't think we'll ever find out the truth. Not that it matters though, he was a fricking jerk anyway. I wonder if the truth will ever be known about the Floridian man of mystery. Or maybe the author is the reason he's missing and is covering his tracks. The captain of the football team was a pretty sad sight. He looked like hell and was so proud of sneaking booze in with his flask. I mean, it was a cash bar, but the prices were reasonable, guys. Mine is in a few months, but the awkwardness has already started. First, I never had any plans to go. Things like that really aren't my speed. I'm not a mingler and I always want to leave right away. Besides, I'll be away on military orders by that time anyway, so there's no way I can go. So a few weeks ago, I get added to a high school 10-year reunion page for my school on Facebook by someone I don't recognize. I immediately think, nope, and leave the page. Then don't think about it again. I got a phone call a few days later from an unknown number. Not unusual since a lot of people call me for work stuff. I answer and get this really enthusiastic, "Oh my god, hi, it's name. How are you?" I apologize and tell her I think she's got the wrong number. I don't know anyone with that name. She says my whole name and says she's got my number from a friend from high school. She was the class president, but to be honest, I don't remember her. She asks about the reunion. I politely tell her I'm not going, I have other obligations. She says, I don't know if that will work, I'll be in touch, and hangs up. I'm like, what the frick, but whatever. A few days later, I get added back to the same group by her, and again, I leave it. Not 30 minutes later, I get another call from her. She wants to know why I left the group again, and again I tell her I have other obligations. She told me that, you don't skip reunions, we've planned this for years, you'll be there. So sarcastically I said, okay, well, save me a spot then, and hung up. A third time I'm added to this group, I'm like, for frick's sake, and I leave again. I get a call, and this time she's calling to tell me that my ticket and dinner money are due by the end of the week. I politely remind her that I'm not going. She gets snooty and informs me that the venue and catering have already been reserved and that I will need to pay for my meal as the fund wouldn't cover it. Once again, I remind her that I was never attending and that it wasn't my fault she had paid in advance without a proper count. She then told me, you don't have a choice, I've already paid for you, so you have to be there. I said, alright, bye. Wrong name, and then hung up again. I ended up blocking her on Facebook, ignoring her calls, and leaving the group 2 more times when other members of the reunion committee added me back in. In short, class president that I don't remember won't take no for an answer. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Probably the reunion itself. Our 10-year was in 2015 and I did not attend as I got roped into helping salvage a 4-wheeler from the river that a couple of buddies had found. If you're interested, the guy who kept it got it running again for about $1,000 worth of parts and work hours. Score! So for about 3 or 4 months leading up to the reunion date, a few of the popular girls from our class started a Facebook group to organize everything, and it seemed to be going really well. People had moved all over the country but were saying they were moving their schedules around to attend. There was talk of renting an event hall on the fairgrounds. One girl's family now owned a local restaurant and offered to put up that venue for an after-hours thing. Everyone seemed really into it, and from what I could see, all seemed ready and willing to put behind them whatever petty grudges and high school BS had existed 10 years before. Comes to the morning of, and absolutely no one has committed anything, and in fact it's almost complete radio silence on the Facebook group. Someone suggests that since we have no place reserved, should everyone just meet at bars downtown or go from there? So it was that exactly 7 people showed up and played oversized Jenga. They at least looked like they had a good time, but what a letdown. I was initially a bit bummed about knowing I was missing our reunion, but when I saw the turnout on Facebook when I got back into cell range, I wasn't that disappointed anymore. That's not too different from mine. We'd planned an event, but apparently the turnout wasn't high enough to cover the cost of the place. That fell through, and one of the organizers made a melodramatic post in the Facebook group, and another organizer put together a small gathering plan for whoever showed up to get dinner. Got 6 of my class plus a girlfriend of one of the guys, had dinner, and then we all hung out at one person's apartment for a couple of hours reminiscing. I think that was probably more fun than the original plan would have been, to be honest. At my 10-year reunion, it was more everyone getting really drunk. At the 20th, there were a few people seemingly bitter at those who'd done pretty well in life. Odd, really. When my lady teacher came up to me, kissed me on the cheek, and told me she loved me. She was very drunk. I felt very awkward. No, she wasn't hot. She was old, once spell-corrected a Christmas card I gave her, and the night of the formal smelled strongly of booze. Haven't had a high school reunion yet, but here's a fun one from my mum's 3rd reunion. She went with my dad back to her hometown for the reunion. My dad grew up in a different place, so he didn't know anybody there. Bored out of his mind, he decided to have some fun and found a way to discreetly ask someone who the biggest juvenile delinquent troublemaker was in their graduating class. Let's call him Albert Davis. So my dad went to the name tag table and found Albert Davis's name tag. He put it on and went around saying hi to everyone just to watch their reactions, because most of them assumed that Albert Davis was in prison. My mum did not think it was funny. Allow me to introduce my partner, the one in our year voted most likely to end up in prison. Excellent prank. Apparently every year my brother's graduating class gets together at this one neighborhood bar over Thanksgiving. It's not a formal thing, but anyone can come and they all have a few drinks and it's totally normal. I literally had no idea about it, and apparently my brother didn't either. Because 3 or 4 years ago, we showed up to get a drink together alone and his entire graduating class of 50-ish people were there. Now, my brother was super nerdy and kind of an awkward kid, but the Marines and college turned that around and now he's an outgoing, sociable guy. Coming out of the closet once he hit 23 helped too, since he was comfortable in his own skin and it showed outwardly. Thing was, no one seemed to know he was gay. And this is small town in the Midwest, where there's nothing else to do but gossip, and since no one leaves, everyone knows everyone else. I literally spent all night cringing while my brother dodged the advances of a bunch of girls aggressively hitting on him. Since the dating pool is the same guys they went to high school with and he was fresh meat, they were all coming on super strong and it was bad. Then everything got worse when he told them he was living on the East Coast because he was gay and married, and his husband's job was there. I went with my wife to her reunion. I may have had 1 or 3 before arriving, and when I got there I remembered hearing a story about a guy who was my wife's 3rd grade boyfriend. Later in life, he'd had a rough time of things. Substances, booze, run-ins with the law, and other things. As a joke, I wrote his name on my name badge and went about my business. Not long after, a rather strong and stocky woman turned around, looked at me, then at my name tag, and when she saw the name, she looked up at me and screamed excitedly, as loud as I've ever heard, and bear hugged me while lifting me off the ground and bit my neck. No blood, but a decent bruise. At my 10-year reunion, one of the good-looking but not very bright guys from my class argued with me that we had done the deed in high school. After 10 minutes of me trying to explain to him that we had never done the deed, I realized he was thinking of my friend's sister, not me. He was then like, "Well, we can fix that." I declined and left. He had gone 10 years not knowing who he had done the deed with. I'm not touching that with someone else's downstairs area, much less my own. Got invited by Facebook message, we're not friends on Facebook, by one of the girls who made pretty much the whole time I was there a living hell. Didn't attend obviously because everyone I wanted to keep in touch with I did. But got a, sorry we missed you, hun, we should do lunch soon message. But why? Selective memory or… Went to a wife's reunion, introduced myself as George Michael. I was only there 3 weeks, I was bullied so I left, but so-and-so invited me. Some people actually bought the story. There's a slight recurring theme of husbands being hilarious goofballs, and I kinda love it. It was a party with all old high school people at it, not sure if people actually have reunions anymore, but it ended up with the same effect. I met up with an ex, and an ex-buddy of mine kept saying crap about how we would be perfect back together. It was just stupid for a ton of reasons, and the dude kept pushing. First, I was married. Didn't bother this dude, he said we should just bang and not tell my wife. Second, she's a lesbian, no interest in men. I knew this already and she had trusted telling me even though I think she kept it private. But this guy pushed and pushed, and when she said she liked girls, he just told her to bring her girlfriend along. I don't even know the guy's endgame, but he looked like a total moron and I'm pretty sure he made my ex feel pretty uncomfortable. Then I had to feel uncomfortable when I finally told him to F off. For us younger folk, there will even be a physical reunion. Someone made a graduating class of 2000 and X, like a year after graduation, which had one post every few months and then had been absolutely dead for several years now. The lighting was dim, we were old, and some nitwit decided to let people scrawl their own name tags, which then hung on lanyards at crotch level. Nobody could hear anything over the snot-nosed DJ blasting Eye of the Tiger, and trying to figure out who you were talking to was pretty awkward. My wife at the time and I had dated all through high school and college. We married and had a child. We still had a few close friends we graduated with that were going as well. I would say that there was about a 70% turnout. We had a good time and everyone got pretty drunk. We all mingled and my wife talked to a guy who she'd cheated on me with right after high school. They didn't speak for more than 3 minutes. They hadn't spoke since that day almost 10 years before. We had moved past it and had a family. At least that's what I thought. Less than a month after the reunion, I could tell that something wasn't right. When I asked her about it, she told me she wasn't happy and wanted a divorce. We'd been together a very long time and I was devastated. After a week of feeling like I'd failed and doing everything I could to win her back, I discovered she'd been having an affair with that same guy. Not my high school reunion, but my mother's. She walked in and was saying hi to a few of the women when one of them dragged their husband over. In a very loud voice, she said, "You remember Sharon? Her brother was the one that fired you last month." My mum ended up avoiding them the rest of the night. I heard that a classmate set the venue on fire. Glad I didn't go. It was lit though. Actually, my high school reunion was the awkward thing. I didn't attend and neither did very many people. Everyone pretty much hated each other, and from what I heard, only one clique turned up, with the odd person from 1 or 2 others making an appearance. Even though I didn't go, it was still awkward when a guy who severely bullied me at school tried adding me on Facebook to invite me to the reunion. She still hates me to this day, so I don't even know why she would have wanted me there, let alone directly contacted me. At our 15th, they asked, then gave out prizes for the person who traveled the farthest to attend, traveled the least far to attend, had the newest car, the oldest car, the youngest child. The look on the MC's face when he realized what he was asking for the oldest child would mean was priceless. Had a 10-year reunion last year. Things were going well at this low-key local bar. Things shut down about 1 a.m. However, everyone is having fun and doesn't want to shut it down. Turns out the old school captain, a smart guy, not particularly socially intelligent though, says we should head back to his place to kick on. Tells the whole grade, 100 to 150 people, to drink what they want, including his dad's blue label scotch, which he thought was the cheap stuff. Ended up costing him several thousand, and apparently his dad, rather understandably, wasn't stoked. Feel bad for him, but I have to laugh. I remember even trying to warn him on the night, but he was riding that social popularity endorphin high, I suspect. I was in the first integrated high school class in 1971. For our 10-year reunion, the organizers did not invite any of the black students. I haven't been back. 5-year reunion. Basically, it boiled down to, what do you do for work? And if you had anything lucrative, people wanted to be your best friend and try to get connections. What are your worst and weirdest experiences with dating apps? He made me watch his homemade rap videos and try to like his own Facebook page on my phone. Met at a coffee shop, she's there early. I order my drink, sit down, and she looks at me, and this is her first sentence. Let's cut to the chase. I need a father for my 4 sons. I got up and left. Just like their actual fathers, huh? I met a girl for a date who turned out to be much better looking than her photos, which is always a nice surprise. The date went well, just dinner and a walk, and we said our goodbyes. The next day, she invited me out to a friend's birthday party downtown as her +1. I wanted to go, but I had to work the next day and wanted to be able to drink a little since it was a bunch of people I didn't know. She said, "That's alright, you can park at my house and sleep over." Cha-ching! So of course I said yes. Fast forward to the middle of the party, I'm enjoying myself, chatting it up with her friends and having a good time, and the next thing I know she absolutely loses it and storms out of the bar, leaving me there, drunk, with her friends. I still have no idea why. One of them told me, she wants you to go after her, and I said, frick that, it's our second date, which not a single person blamed me for. I stayed at the party and switched to water while I continued talking with her friends. That was over a year ago, and I still regularly hang out with them. They've since stopped talking to her. 2-date relationship and you got custody. Good job. Perfectly nice date. 20 minutes into it, she says, I'll be honest, I know what I need in a man, and you don't have it. At 25, I would have been crushed, wondering what it was would have kept me up for days. Being 35, I thanked her for being blunt and was happy to have an unexpectedly free evening. I'll be totally honest, at 45 I would have greatly appreciated her honesty and then cried myself to sleep that night. Regardless of anything else, I would have felt like a complete failure, but I would have respected her honesty. I completely sympathize with both of these viewpoints. I guess it depends on how much I like the person and how high my hopes are after a first date. In my 30s, I'm still not immune to the whole getting starry-eyed after one date effect. Not me, but my friend went on a really great Tinder date a few months ago. She said they really seemed to hit it off. They got some margaritas, had a fun but very deep conversation about life and other philosophical things, and then made out a little bit. She didn't hear from him for the rest of the weekend, which felt odd because she had such a great feeling about him. She usually has a good radar for these things. She ended up stalking him on Facebook to see what he was up to. He'd self-deleted. She was lying about her age and wanted a baby, starting immediately. Okay, to elaborate, the profile said she was 19 and she was really, really freaking hot, so I was pretty interested. We text and talk on the phone. She does cutesy, kinda immature stuff, but I blow it off thinking she's just awkward at flirting. One night, we're texting and she starts sending me pictures. And these were quite adult in nature, so now I'm extremely interested in meeting up. She agrees, but on one condition: no protection. I'm curious about her medical history. I try to stay clean despite being a filthy man hussy, so I ask when she last got tested. Oh, I haven't been to the doctor in a couple of years, she says. So I inquire how she has birth control, and of course she doesn't. Turns out she saw that I was a single dad and just assumed I'd be okay with siring another offspring. She was wrong. She got extremely upset and originally begged me to reconsider and that she needed a child in her life. When I remained unwilling, she dropped the bombshell. She was 17 and more than willing to go to the cops about the pictures I had on my phone if I didn't give her a baby. Delete every freaking thing and block her right there and immediately. I don't have Tinder anymore. We went out for drinks and then walked around the park, and it was an enjoyable date. I took her home and parked next to her apartment. She said I shouldn't park there because I will get towed. I said I only need 3 minutes to walk you to your door. She said, seriously, you should park in visitors since you can stay all night and not get towed. I responded, oh, don't worry, I only need 3 minutes to walk you to your door. I'm not a smart man. We went to her place, ate some special fungi, and then did the deed. She was a biter, and it was like doing the deed with a giant spider. Needless to say, I didn't have a great time and she kicked me out. I sat in my car outside for 2 long hours, tripping on shrooms and trying to come to terms with what felt like dying. Woke up the next morning with large bite marks. Never do shrooms with strange Tinder girls. Funny. I went on an OkCupid date. We ate the same special fungi. We had a great dinner, great convo, and made out at his place. He pushed for more, but I was trying to take a new, slow approach. 10 minutes later, I'm sitting in my car in his apartment parking lot, mildly tripping and looking at the pretty lights and thinking about how time works. He never called me again. All in all, not the worst, but certainly not the best. Mushrooms and online dating? Maybe not. Met with a girl who ended up being 16. I was 18 at the time. She told me how, on her last date, the guy drove her to a secluded area and told her she had to give him head or he wouldn't drive her home, and she asked me not to do that to her. I took her home immediately and never met another girl online again. It kinda sounds like she's got you beat for the worst Tinder story, to be honest. My profile picture is a toilet. The first time I met a girl, we actually talked about toilets for an hour. Your pic is a toilet and you got a match? Thanks for rubbing it in. Not an awful date, but after I told him I wasn't interested in pursuing it further, he insisted I left my socks at his place, and I had to get them because they look like really nice socks and I'm sure you'd want them back. This went on for several days. Obviously, it was a weird ploy to get me back to his house. I just think he could have thought of something way better. I mean, it was winter, so clearly I put my socks and shoes back on before leaving. He showed up with his iPhone on a lanyard, around his neck, but he introduced me to Reddit, so I guess it went okay. And I should really thank him because I met my fiancé on Reddit and he's in the process of moving halfway around the world for me. Friend from class matched with my then girlfriend, now ex. He informed me of the match and proceeded to set up a coffee date. Instead of him showing up to the date, I did. I had the pleasure of watching my girlfriend freak the F out. I mean, I hope that she became your ex minutes after this encounter and that you didn't both get stuck in an absolutely poisonous relationship of mistrust and nastiness afterwards. I have a doozy. So last year, after getting out of a horrible sort of relationship, I decided to try something casual and use Tinder. Got lots of responses and everything was going well. The dates were mostly lackluster and I figured I was just being too picky. So I decided that the next 5 people to ask me on dates get a yes. Bad move. So the first guy I go on a date with wants me to drive into the city, 45 minutes away, so we would have more stuff to do. Annoying, but sort of understandable as I'm in a suburb without much exciting things. We meet and he looks like his pictures. We say hello and he tells me that we're going to go play soccer in the park. Cool, I love sports. On the way we start talking and asking questions about each other, and I'm getting the vibe that we aren't such a great match. I love to travel and he has zero desire. He only likes obscure sports and I love them all. But hey, I'm here, stick with it. The entire time he talks about how he makes so much money and how embarrassing it is for his friend to only make $60K a year at his dream job. I make half of that. I would have left considering the love connection or lack thereof, but I figured I'd be polite until after lunch. We head out and we arrive. Dollar taco, which don't get me wrong, we don't have to splurge, but he looked me up and down and said, "You've got to earn your meal first," and gave me a creepy freaking smile. Nope, I feign a fake cell phone call and have to leave, but he insists on walking me to my car. We get there and I try to shrug him off and get the frick out, but then it happens. He leans in for a kiss. But not just any kiss, open mouth, tongue out. And as he leans in, his crotch brushes against my leg. Unfortunately for him, the soccer shorts didn't conceal his raging, hard eggplant. So I did what any caught-off-guard girl would do. I accidentally laughed in his mouth. Oops, I was too awkward to say anything and just got in the car, driving away. Met up for a coffee after having quite a nice chat over Tinder for a few days. He sits down and says, "Hey, nice to meet you," then continues to pull out his laptop and sit there in complete silence for the next hour. I had nothing with me but my phone since I thought coffee date means conversation. Should have left sooner. So I show up at the coffee shop and the B word was just sitting there with some guy that looked like her boyfriend. They just sat there on their laptops and phones while I drank my latte at a nearby table like an idiot. I'm seriously considering that this is the actual story. I met one absolute charmer after talking for a few weeks. After agreeing to meet at a nearby coffee shop, I show up right on time. 10 minutes later, I get a text from him to come outside. Seems sketchy, but there's people about, so why not? I stand directly in front and he appears out of nowhere in a hoodie. We walk a bit before he asks me to walk down a darkly lit street. I say I'm uncomfortable and he immediately starts walking away. I assume he's joking and call him, only to hear him screaming at me on the other end. He sends me a text a couple of days later insulting my hair and telling me to suck my big eggplant, you N-word, B-word. In all honesty, that's so sketchy I'd consider reporting that to the police. It really sounds like he's looking for victims, and he might have succeeded at some point. Just for people who are wondering, you can call the police on a non-emergency line and tell them the situation. It's not about getting the guy arrested, he didn't break the law, but it's about informing them in case they've had some other attacks or crimes that could be similar in nature. My wife once did this a couple of hours after having a similar experience. Turns out they were looking for a guy who had the MO of the guy she described, and they wished she'd called them sooner, even though technically he didn't do anything illegal to my wife. I got matched with a friend of mine I was really interested in, and everything was really cool. We ended up dating a couple of months after the first night we spent together. Then she slept with one of my best friends. That wasn't really cool. If you want to be my lover, you gotta get with my friends. Albert E. Roosevelt. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My first date with this guy would have been his cat's funeral. Luckily, I had the common sense not to take it that far. I'd matched with a guy and we began to be hitting it off. So I gave him my cell number, and of course he became increasingly strange. He was telling me about his cat and how he was worried about her because she was very ill. Okay, I understand having a sick pet is sad. Then he began to tell me about their relationship and how she was always there for him. Yep, I'm close to my animals too, that's fine. But then he began discussing how he doesn't know what to do if his cat passes away, and how he might just self-delete unless I'd be willing to take his cat's place. No? After that, I stopped talking to him. He started messaging me furiously. He told me how his cat had died and he needed me to talk him through this. I expressed my condolences and tried to shake him off. He then proceeds to explain how we should meet up at his cat's funeral. I don't respond. I didn't intend on becoming a skin suit anytime soon. His last text to me was an angry ramble describing in graphic detail how it was to eat his cat's ashes. He consumed his cat. 1. When I was someone's Tinder nightmare. I got way too drunk, puked on myself, total blackout. 2. Tinder nightmare. Went on the date. 5 minutes into the conversation, he flips it to September 11th conspiracy theories and doesn't drop it, even after I explicitly state that the conversation is inappropriate. Told him later by text that I didn't think we were compatible. Cue 2 months of 3 a.m. phone calls where he pretends to be a furniture or renovation company that had problems delivering my order. To clarify, I asked politely for the subject to be changed before letting him know it was inappropriate. For those others who've expressed that this doesn't sit well with them, I guess it's good we're not dating? I think it's a healthy level of perspective to be able to admit that you've both had and been a nightmare date at some point in your life. We all go through stuff, people. There are some fun follow-ons to that second story. The fact that someone rationalized phoning at 3 a.m. pretending to be a furniture company makes me laugh. Hello, this is IKEA speaking. First date is going well. She's way out of my league and seems very much into me. Later, we're back at my place, after dinner and making out on the couch a little. We head into the bedroom and the clothes are coming off. Just as I'm about to slip it in, she says, "Wait, what? You should know I have herpes." Very funny. "No, I really do, and I'm in the middle of an outbreak." "You're joking." "I'm not. Do you need a minute?" Being fairly herpes naive, I reply, Yep. I go out to my porch and sit down on a chair. After a minute, I hear her crying in my bedroom. She dresses and comes out. She asks me if I need some time to think, and I tell her that I do. We talk a little about other things. I drive her home and then spend the weekend completely torn up, weighing my options. Is she worth getting herpes over? You've only known her for 6 hours. Ultimately, I go out with her a few more times, and it turns out not only does she have the herps, but she's bat crap crazy. I dump her, and she tries to self-delete. Another hilarious story in and of itself. And I test negative for herpes. Back to the drawing board. We went on 3 or 4 dates. I 30-year-old male, was starting to get feelings and I liked this girl, 25. On our fourth date, she asked if I could watch her cat while she was moving apartments. I'm not a fan of cats. Sorry, YouTube, but I'm a nice guy and kept the cat in my home office. Long story short, she doesn't answer her phone for over a week and only picks up her cat when I sent a message saying it's going to the local shelter within 24 hours. Fricking Tinder. Matched with this guy, we talked for a little bit and we didn't really seem to have anything in common, so I didn't plan on going out with him. When I finally did decline, he threw a fit and pestered me, promising a lovely night out and to just give him a chance. That should have been my first clue. Now, at this point in my life, I was admittedly very picky about guys I'd go out with, and this guy, as well as my roommates, encouraged me to just go because maybe I'm missing out on a nice person. Fine. We go to sushi, no attraction, nothing in common, horrible conversation. Every time I tried to lead with a subject, he ended it. What's your favorite restaurant? I don't know. Do you play any sports? No. The conversation was a dead end at every turn. Had a terrible time. Good sushi, though. I insisted I pay half the bill and we walked out. Then he grabbed me by the arm very aggressively, insisting we go to Starbucks for coffee. I said, no thank you, I just ate, I'm very full. I have a test tomorrow, whatever. But he literally overpowered me and pulled me in and sat us down at a table. Now I was freaked out. We sat awkwardly, silently. I asked, are you getting coffee or… He smiled and said, no, I don't want any. I said, okay, so why are we here? And he slipped his hand between my thighs and credit carded me under the table. I was mortified and moved away. I said, I'm going home now. I thank God I drove separately. As I got to my car, he asked, so when can we go out again? I almost laughed at him, but I was polite because I'm a huge wuss. I said, well, you're very nice. Lie. But we don't have much in common, and I don't really feel the chemistry, but thanks for showing me the new sushi restaurant. You're a fricking C-word. You're just the same as all women. I thought you were different, you dumb bimbo piece of crap. F you. I got in my car and left. When I got home, I had many texts from him and his roommate. From date guy, I got a lot of frick you, and from the roommate, I got a few angry and concerned ones like, my roommate came home really upset and teed off. What the frick did you do to him? You're a B-word. I literally had no idea people could be like that. It really soured my Tinder experience, but I had fun laughing at the texts with my roommates. We went on 3 dates. The next time she asked to see me, I told her I was visiting family and wouldn't be available until the following weekend. In that moment, she freaked out and sent me a 7-page-long text about how I destroyed what could have been a perfect relationship and that she wanted to marry me still if I would just put her first. She then left me a voicemail of her singing You've Got It Bad by Usher while crying and saying she loved me over and over. 2 days later, she sent me pictures of her burning a bucket list she had made for us. Kinda glad I got out of that one unscathed. Recently met this guy on Tinder and have been on 3 dates with him. First date went really well until his car got towed. Second date, we went to his place, got drunk and banged, ended up with protection stuck inside me, and proceeded to freak the frick out and had to go to ER. Third date, he got me high for the first time, got me way too high, freaked out again, and started pinching his chest really hard and speaking Thai. He added me on Facebook after that. 8 out of 10 would go on date again. I genuinely can't tell if this person is being sarcastic with the rating or not. It sounds like you guys had fun together, even if all 3 dates got weird on some level. I wonder if these two went on any more dates and what levels of destruction were unleashed. Were you able to speak Thai before getting high? I want to know too. I'd like to learn Thai and this sounds like the easiest way. I once went on a date with a woman who claimed she hadn't smoked green herb since like the 8th grade because once she started getting into white snow, what was the point? But now she was smoking to help with the nausea because her shrinks put her on lithium. It was a lot of info for the 3rd sentence of a date. I met a girl on Tinder. I think I won her over with my jokes about loving dirty socks and old Greg. We talk for a while and finally decide to go to a lake. We both love nature. We go, meet, hug, and sit down on a blanket by the lake. We talk for a bit. About 10 minutes later, I hear a splat. She looks down and laughs. I look down at her leg. There, sitting on her right leg, is a big white, pebbly bird crap. I ask, did a bird just crap on your leg? She says yes and laughs again. Before the date, we'd promised no bullcrap. We must be ourselves. I don't think before I catch myself wiping the bird crap off her leg with my hand. I go to the lake, wash my hand off, and go and sit back down. We have a little laugh, talk for another couple of hours, and decide to call it a night. We go back to our cars and I give her the goodbye. I wasn't sure if I should give her a hug or a kiss at this point. I didn't want to be invasive. As I'm hugging her and thinking about the kiss, I start to harden up down there. I regret the decision to wear athletic shorts. I think I have two options. 1, turn around after the hug and walk back to my car. 2, try to conspicuously tuck the little guy into my waistline of my athletic shorts and go for the kiss. I go for option 3. Things are happening down there. I can't keep hugging you. We laugh. I hug her again and say, I'll talk to you soon. We promised we'd be honest. But on my way back to my car, I just keep thinking, crap, too honest, too honest. I turn on my car and wait to see if she's going to leave first. Then she gets out of her car and walks towards me with something in her hands. I roll down my window. You forgot the banana bread I made for you. I couldn't believe I made her come back to the awkwardness to make her give me the banana bread she'd made for me. I take it from her, we both still laugh a bit about the boner thing, and I put the banana bread on the passenger seat. Then, and this is the part I still can't believe, she leans in, we kiss. A gentle, small, but amazing kiss. She walks back to her car and drives away. I do a couple of fist pumps and then drive home. On my way home, I start to question what the frick just happened. So much about myself to doubt, but so much greatness to it. What just happened? I'm driving home and Bohemian Rhapsody comes on. I have a Wayne's World moment. I will not let you go! Fast forward 3 months, we're still talking. I saw her tonight. We went to a creek again. We've gotten poison ivy from each other, been camping, shared great music. It's all been so great. I don't ever want to leave her. When we look back, she says I won her over when I wiped the bird crap off her leg. Needless to say, that bird was my wingman. And yeah, I read the title as Worst or Weirdest Experiences, but I've only gone on one Tinder date, so technically this is my worst Tinder experience. It's also my best. What's your latest, I don't want to live on this planet anymore moment? I watched a school bus run a red light at a 6-lane across major intersection this afternoon. Spoke to one of my newer employees regarding issues with her work. That evening, I received an email from her father asking to meet with me because his 23-year-old daughter came home upset. I'm not kidding. I mentioned a professor's teaching style that I don't care for to my mother. She sent him an email and he brought it up with me later. Single most embarrassing point of my academic career. I told my dad in a letter when I was in basic that one of the drill sergeants, though great at his job, also scared the ever-loving crap out of me. I got called into the captain's office and they played a voicemail my dad had left where he said, "That drill sergeant has no decency and is a lousy excuse for a serviceman." Well, you can only imagine my horror as that particular drill sergeant sat there grinning like an oversized gorilla on smack. I work at a pet store. This lady came in with her son who couldn't be older than 5 or so. She asked if I could help them with a ball python. When I took it out, she was really excited to hold it and immediately kept telling her son how they were going to convince his dad to let them get it. Her son was clearly afraid of the snake, and she kept trying to get him to hold it. He kept telling her he was afraid that it will bite him. She tried to tell him that snakes don't bite, and turned to me wanting me to tell him the same thing. I told the boy, "While snakes can bite, ours are quite friendly and won't want to bite you if you hold them gently." His mum was furious that I wouldn't tell this kid that snakes can't bite. I tried to tell her why I can't lie, but she said it was unacceptable, and now I've scared her son for life. I suggested he hold a bearded dragon, and he loved it. I think he left happier than she did. 2 college students were standing in the middle of a busy road this morning talking to each other. They were nearly hit by every car, but didn't let that stop their conversation. This happened to me last summer. Was driving down a busy street with a friend in the car when suddenly 2 teen girls scampered across the street in between cars and directly inches in front of my moving vehicle. I slammed on the brakes, my friend and I sat in shocked silence for about 15 seconds, and the girls just kept on going like they hadn't had a near-death experience. After 15 seconds had elapsed, both of us in the car just started screaming hysterically. One of the phrases I screamed after, "I almost frickin' killed a human!" was, "You almost made me kill you, and then you don't even frickin' look at me!" Seriously, my whole alternate life path where the guilt from killing 2 kids flashed before my eyes and I was so fricking teed off on behalf of alternate universe me. F those people. Watch where the frick you're walking. I think we've all had those moments in life where an errant twitch could have got us or someone else killed, and they keep us up at night. Although admittedly, I have too many to count now. The comments on any CNN article make me want to give up living on this planet. The Daily Mail website for the UK. The comments section is ridiculous. Will the rest of the world please stop linking to them on Reddit? I kinda think YouTube has to be the worst. I watched a Minute Physics episode and the comments were full of people arguing about religion and the scientific inaccuracies of the video. The thing is, the episode was on balancing pencils. People got offended and got in arguments because of pencil balancing. This just happened at a somewhat nearby school to me. The school's soccer team duct-taped a kid who was on the spectrum that wanted to play soccer to a football goalpost. They all left the field and he was found 15 minutes later. Seriously, what the frick is wrong with people? Time to end the soccer season permanently for that team. The San Francisco 49ers fan that nearly beat a guy to death in the bathroom because he allegedly tapped on his shoulder to tell him the stall in front of him was open. They don't deserve to ever see the light of day again. Yesterday, a lady cut in front of me at the grocery store. I said, "Excuse me, there's a line," and she replied, "I'm pregnant, you understand?" What? To clarify, she wasn't that far along. If you looked at her, you'd have wondered if she were pregnant or just chunky. Then the two of you need to get to the back of the frickin' line. I was recently on a megabus from DC to New York, and a family with several young children was trying to find the last untaken seats. There was clearly a seat open, but when they asked the girl, she was like, "Sorry, I want to leave the seat open so I can sleep." The family was like, no, that's not how it works. They had to get the bus driver and bring him to the back. The lady said the same thing to the bus driver, and the bus driver was like, no, that's not how this works. So the kid ended up sitting next to this girl. How did she think this was going to slide? Oh, I have a story. Last year I went to a Penguins-Flyers hockey game. If you aren't aware, it's one of the biggest rivalries in all of hockey. I'm a Penguins fan and the game was in Philadelphia. The game was going great and the Penguins took the lead and I was the only one cheering in my section. Some Flyers fans looked at me weird after that. Well, the game was over, Penguins win and I'm going to the bathroom. The guys who were sitting in my section followed me in and they each punched me after getting my attention. Some other fans saw and called the police on them. There were 3 of them. I had a bloody lip and bruised left cheek. Oh, and the best part? I was only 17. I was out for a motorcycle ride yesterday. I stopped at the spot off the main road to stretch my legs a bit. Noticed in the bushes that there were bags and bags of garbage all dumped in one spot. Not like a McDonald's bag that someone casually threw out their window, more like someone loaded up what could possibly be months' worth of household garbage and dumped them in the woods. People like that? Frick them. Some comments here have inspired me. I babysat 2 boys, 3 and 5 years old, and a girl, 2 years old, for a single mother this summer. The mother has no job. The mother has no income. I babysit, but I don't actually know what it's accomplishing while she's out most of the time. She lives in her parents' house, but they work full-time jobs, and is also on WIC vouchers. The government pays for her to get food for the kids. She doesn't have a skill that she practices, nor does she maintain any semblance of physical fitness. Her children are kept in a room starting anywhere from 9 p.m. if they make her mad, to midnight, and they're not allowed to exit the room until the mother wakes in the morning. The catch? The mother uses Facebook or Netflix until 3, 4, or 5 a.m. each night. She sleeps until at least 11 a.m. every day unless the children have an appointment in the morning. I want to confirm that this is sometimes over 12 consecutive hours of confinement that occurs more often than not. They're allowed to use the bathroom as long as they return to the room when they're done. I don't know what to do, so I take the kids on walks. They are ecstatic just walking down the sidewalk for a few blocks and coming right back with no stops along the way. And I play games with them while I take care of them. Once I asked the 5-year-old if he'd like to eat breakfast with me at 10 a.m. He was just coming out of the bathroom. His response of, "I think I have to wait for everyone to wake up," indicates to me that he believes his confinement is normal. He went back into the room and I didn't see him for the next couple of hours. He eats dinner at the same time his grandparents eat, which is between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. almost every night. I'm so confused about this, I don't even know what's bothering me the most. Went hiking this weekend in Rocky Mountain National Park. A lot of things about people there annoy me. The list includes feeding wildlife cheese puffs, walking on the tundra that multiple signs clearly say to keep off, initials carved into aspen trees, and stopping their cars in the middle of the road on the peak of a mountain. That kind of thing makes me so angry. I once saw a guy offer an ostrich a lit cigar at the zoo after already feeding it chips, so the ostrich obviously thought that the cigarette was food too. I was so appalled that anyone could imagine that was acceptable behavior. I just don't understand how anyone could do anything like injure animals, damage nature, or litter. I saw someone post an article on Facebook about how Ebola was Obama's revenge against white people for slavery, and all of these people commenting, "Oh my god, it makes sense." A disease outbreak in Africa which is killing African people is a revenge against white people, and Obama made it happen. I think my brain is bleeding from the amount of stupid there. Obviously, a bunch of these stories are quite dated, but yeah, wow. I suspect that a lot of people with these theories went on to vote for the next guy in the White House. Last Saturday, I was walking along a vacant sidewalk when I was approached by a middle-aged couple. They were in jogging suits and walking considerably faster than I, so I moved to the grass to give them space. When they got closer, the woman started yelling at me that I wasn't far enough out of the way. I apologized, only to be intentionally clipped by the man following her and landing on my back. I got back up and laughed it off, only to hear the man yelling, "You're not the only one in this city, butthole." At that point, I was pretty amazed at how somebody can be that angry at someone they don't know. I hadn't said anything to them to start. Oh my god! Something similar happened to me once. I was walking down the sidewalk headed south and texting my sister, glancing up every few seconds to see what I was headed for. I look up and two guys on bikes were riding straight toward me, so I step onto the grass so they can get by. As they ride past me, one of them yells that I need to watch where I'm going. What the frick? So I yelled back that they shouldn't be riding their frickin' bikes on the sidewalk. Almost 4 years later, and I remember exactly every detail of that moment. I'm still mad just thinking of it. So I live near a family that's just horrible. They locked their young son outside their house because he's annoying as frick and they're horrible parents. I'm walking outside and he's in their open garage. He has a bottle in his hands. I get closer. He's about to spray weed killer in his mouth. He does it before I rush in. I pound the door with the kid under my arm. The mum gives me a what the frick look and I scream about her kid eating poison. She rushes to the car and they drive off. I saw some guy trying to grab a duck at my local zoo. He's throwing it food and when it came near, he tried to grab it. This happened several times before I told him to stop. His friend immediately butts in and asks why I'm being such a butthole. Apparently me telling the guy he shouldn't grab the duck is the greater offense than actually trying to grab the duck. Fortunately, my wife pulled me away. Probably the best thing since I'd already stopped him from continuing his attempted duck molestation, and we were already close to a physical confrontation. Some buttholes broke into the zoo earlier this week and stole a flamingo. By the time someone found the flamingo, it was so severely injured that it had to be euthanized. I freaking hate people. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I got shoulder checked by a C-word in a suit, walking down with his two mates 3 abreast down the pavement. I was walking slowly down the inside, left-hand side of the pavement. We drive on the left in Australia, so I was following the road rules. Left lane is the slow lane. That was nasty, but why was I walking slowly? 8 months preggers. Bump like a beach ball. Mr. C-word in a suit didn't think I was far enough out of his way. I cried out when he hit me, and one of his mates turned around and got a shocked look on his face when he saw his scumbag friend has just shoulder-charged a preggers woman. But he didn't stop. Luckily, I was outside a little shop, and the Vietnamese lady running it came racing out just as I fell over crying. She gave me a cold water and had me sit down until I calmed down a bit. What a fricking tunt that bloke was. I just know karma's gonna bite him in the tush big time. No one that crappy gets far in life. Reading YouTube comments. I think there's a general rule not to read the comments on YouTube unless you want to feel like punching something. You should try Yahoo. You'll be mad and confused. Last week, a man in a car in front of me threw a full-sized Pringles can out of his window and almost hit my car. First of all, how lazy do you have to be to fricking litter? Second of all, why would you be eating a full-sized can of Pringles while driving? Once you pop. My husband eats a full-sized can of Pringles every time we drive somewhere more than an hour away. I try to get him to eat the snack size, but no dice. 'Cause he's a real man. Well, not if his hand fits inside a Pringles can. I had that moment when I learned how people actually spend thousands of dollars and get all territorial in Second Life. Apparently, some people take this crap seriously. Wait. Second Life is still on? You should see the crap that happens in EVE Online. People have gone as far as physically cutting opponents' power lines and sending working girls to high-ranking fleet members as a bribe. This isn't recent, but this is what happened when I first experienced how society is. I was 10 or 11 years old and I'd just come home from playing soccer with a kid from our neighborhood. Before I can walk inside the door, my grandma stopped me and told me that I have to take a shower and do a small puja before walking in because the kid I was playing with was son of the family who makes a living by cleaning houses. My grandma was treating them as untouchables. Made me realize how illogical she is. A couple of months ago when I stopped two guys, one in their early 20s, the other closer to 50, dragging an 18-year-old girl into a taxi while she tried to pull away from them. When I confronted them, I was beaten pretty hard and then pushed in front of a car. No broken bones, but it was doing about 25 miles per hour and the road rash sucked, but it drew enough of a crowd that she got away. Screw those two guys and the taxi driver that seemed to think it was acceptable. I still have nerve damage in my left hand from that fricking car. Also, the girl is fine. I still talk to her. She recovered well. No, she is not my girlfriend. I already had and continue to have one. They're good friends as well, though. A woman changed her baby on the table of the busy restaurant I work in. Seriously, what the frick? People eating their lunch don't want to see your poopy, naked child. I've had to get managers to explain to customers that changing a dirty diaper in the middle of a restaurant is unsanitary way more times than I should have to. I'm so glad that I no longer wait at tables. Please tell me that someone actually threw her out. We didn't need to, she actually paid up and left pretty soon afterwards. She seemed genuinely surprised at the amount of people staring in disgust that I think it made her uncomfortable. Good. Look, being a new parent is hard and I'm all for people being able to feed their babies in any given public setting. But yeah, maybe keep the fecal matter away from food. I think this lady maybe just needed a reminder rather than the vitriol and exile that some of the commenters seem to think she deserves. Every time I see a driver signal to change lanes and the guy 5 car lengths behind him speeds way the frick up to stop him from moving over. If you're reading this and you do that, F you. Every time I drive a car. I clicked on a link to a GIF of a man cutting the tip of his eggplant off. Went to the local market and noticed this dog, a miniature Doberman, waiting by the door when I went in. I finished in the market. On my way out, I noticed it was following people around, very submissive and timid-like, with its tail between its legs. Then the people just motioned or kicked him away. He just sat in the middle of the parking lot, looking very confused. Another person was putting their groceries in the car next to me, saw the dog and said, "I've seen that dog wandering the neighborhood. It's sad. I think it was abandoned." Just as she said that, here comes the local idiot in a pickup truck, sees the dog in the middle of the road, steps on the gas and hits it. It happened so quick. After the pickup hit Charlie, he just sat there confused. I called to him. He came to me with his tail between his legs, slight limp. His paw was ground raw. I took him to the vet, no chip, no collar, under a year old. Rescued him. This literally happened to me less than an hour ago. I was at Walmart with a friend and he needed to buy some ham. It was a supercenter. Yes, I know buying produce meat at Walmart was my first mistake, but it's the closest convenience store. We go up to the counter and the lady is obviously too busy putting rotisserie chickens in plastic containers to acknowledge us. So I say, "Excuse me," not rudely, just to get her attention. She looks up like I just called her a thunder C-word or something and comes over all irritated. I say, "Can we get a pound of honey-cured ham, please?" Yes, I said please. I'm not recreating this to make me sound like a better person. She's clearly distressed by the whole ordeal, having to open the display, grab out the ham, stuff that is physically taxing. Then she says, "Do you want that cut 1 or 2? I've never been asked that before, so I thought she asked if I wanted 1 pound or 2. So I replied, "Just 1 pound's fine." "No, do you want it cut 1 or 2? She literally yelled the question at me. Took me a second to realize that meant the thickness of the slices of ham, but I had no idea which one was thinner. I'm still trying to be nice, but I'm slowly losing it. I just ask, "Which one's thinner?" She doesn't even reply, she just goes back and starts talking crap about me to her other co-worker, who seems nice, but probably heard the bullcrap version of the story. The lady comes back with the ham, slams it on the scale, puts it in the bag and sends me on my way. The thing that made me think I don't want to live on this planet anymore wasn't the frustration or the yelling at me, it was the fact that she expected me to know what 1 and 2 meant for the fricking slicing machine. I mean seriously, who the frick expects people to know the exact specifications of their sliced meat? I was driving down a road and this guy was coming towards me on the right-hand side at an upcoming intersection. The road he was coming from was a small road leading from a store. I was on the major road, he had a stop sign. I didn't. He blows through the stop sign, turning right in front of me without even so much as looking either direction to see if the road was clear. Or signaling, but I guess that's to be assumed at this point. I had to slam on my brakes and would have hit him, but I laid on the horn, he saw me, put his foot on the gas, and the collision was very narrowly avoided. If you're gonna blow a stop sign, at least look to see if other vehicles are coming. My 14-year-old daughter, who lives most of the time with her mother, my ex, and stepfather, recently invited me to go to an anime and Japanese culture convention with her. Even wanted me to wear my ninja gear for some cosplay. She was super excited about it, and since it's happening on a weekend when she's with me, I said, heck yeah, I'll go with you. Unfortunately, I have to involve the ex and stepfather in the process. As soon as I start trying to plan the logistics with them, I get a call from my daughter using my ex's phone, and she tells me now that she doesn't really want me to come after all. I strongly suspect she's got in trouble for inviting me, and her mum forced her to do that second part. I truly hate that woman. I was doing work at Starbucks, minding my own business. Despite the fact that I have headphones in and I'm ignoring him, this guy takes a seat across from me at this two-person table. He starts hitting on me and yelling so I can hear him over my music. My sweater is opened, and as I shift to look away from him, the port in my chest, at the time I was on chemo, becomes visible. He sees it and starts telling me that I'm a hideous monster, I shouldn't be allowed in public, and calls the attention of the barista, asking him to kick me out for his personal safety. Yeah. Recently brought a few chickens. The second day they were here, the usual neighbor kids came over to play. I sat down and feed the baby, and about 10 minutes in I have to get up because I hear kids screaming and chickens losing it. I walk back out to a dozen children I don't know, 4 of which have busted my hen run and are in with the chickens. One kid has a hen by her wing. She flaps, he lets go, and then he kicks her. Needless to say, I was upset. Without leaving my porch, I said, "Get out, all of you! I don't know what makes you think it's appropriate to hit someone else's animal. I don't know what would make you think it's okay to do that to any animal in general, but it is in no uncertain terms not okay. I don't know who you are, but get the frick off my property." I tell my kids and the neighbors' kids they play with that no one's allowed in the backyard. I go back inside to feed the baby. I'm not even sat down yet and I hear the fridge door open. I say, "Toddler's name, no snacks right now." Guess what? Not my toddler. Some neighbor kid I don't know just walked in and opened my fridge. Now, he wasn't the crap that kicked my chicken, but he was in the run. I kicked the kid out. As I open the door to escort the fridge raider from my home, the chicken kicker shows up with his mummy. "You B-word, you think you're so much better than my son? How dare you tell him what to do? I'm gonna call the cops on your butt." I tell her, calmly, that I probably shouldn't have sworn at her son, but he can't just go around kicking animals. She leaves to call the cops anyway. Comes back 15 minutes later, says she wants to settle this like adults and will consider $100 to cover the mental anguish from my yelling at her son. I tell her to just call the cops and have them deal with it. I get called a B-word again and she leaves. In short, kid kicks my chicken, I tell him to leave, his mum wants $100 for mental anguish from me yelling at him. Parents, what's the most messed up thing you've caught your kid doing? My wife was driving our then 3-year-old back from her aunt's house to eat lunch. She noticed him cram something in his mouth and start chewing, and she asked him what he was eating. No response. Thinking he might be choking or something, she brakes hard, pulls over to the side of the road, yanks the back door open and grabs a French fry out of his mouth. Now, they'd been to McDonald's several days before and the car had been cleaned since then, so she looks high and low to see where it came from. She gets suspicious and takes the cover off his car seat. Lo and behold, there's about a dozen stale French fries in the folds of the plastic car seat. Far too many to be accounted for by random drops. The kid was stashing them for later, like a squirrel. This is tame by comparison to some of the other stories here, but here it is. When my son was about a year old, I found him stuffing his pants pockets full of Vaseline, scooping it out with his hands. Really makes me wonder why little kids' clothes even have pockets. I was dressing my 4-month-old son the other day. His trousers had pockets on them. Like, what the heck does a 4-month-old need pockets for? My 4-year-old daughter used to stash steak knives in strategic locations around the house. My neighbor busted her doing it. I didn't believe him until he pulled out a 6-inch carving knife from behind a bookcase. With the right mentor, your daughter will grow up to be an amazing badass. My friend who worked in a residential treatment facility once found a kid who'd stuck a paperclip into an electrical outlet and was lying on the floor looking at it. When asked what he was doing, the kid replied, "Every time I touch this with my tongue, I wet my pants." I read that in Ralph Wiggum's voice from The Simpsons. My daughter crapped in a box and gave it to my son as a present in front of our whole family. I guess no one really caught her as she was obviously and openly trolling. Pretty messed up, I didn't even know what to say to that. I caught my son, 7, and his best friend, 9, drawing clown faces on each other's butt cheeks and with the plans of tooting in each other's faces. I mean, yeah, it's gross, but it's also objectively hilarious and weirdly cute, not that I can put my finger on why. One of the less messed up things in this grouping by far. A few weeks ago, my 4-year-old said she had to pee. She was in the bathroom for maybe 5 minutes when we start hearing her gag, so I tell her dad to go and check on her. He walks in and she quickly throws a huge log back in the toilet and tries to hide her doo-doo covered hands. When he asked her why she was playing with her caca, she said she wanted to see how squishy it was. Ugh. I did this once when I was a kid. It stuck to my hands, obviously. I was not pleased and never did it again. Friend's daughter once said pretty loudly in a bus, "Look, Daddy, Uncle's beard looks like Mom's pee-pee." I lived in a condo when I was a kid. The family living above us had a girl my age, who I played with in a small forest bordering our backyard from time to time. She used to pick up these big black slugs from the ground and lick the thick black slime off of them, like completely savoring every drop. She thought it was yummy and would easily do a dozen slugs in one sitting. Her parents discovered it, and needless to say, we were not allowed to play in the forest anymore. Walking in on my son flirting on Omegle. He was 7 at that time. The youngest one, age 5 at the time, stuck multiple quarters in the skin of his pee-pee and showed my best friend his change dispenser impersonation. It was hilarious and deeply weird. My son went through a phase where he would wake up from his nap, unbeknownst to us, take off his diaper and smear his doo-doo all over his room. It'd be on his bed, the walls, the windows, his toys. Worst of all, there would be places where it looked like he'd rubbed it into the carpet with all his might. I wish I could say this only happened once. We also caught him tasting and eating his own boom boom more than once. My son did that for a year. Every day after his nap, I would take a deep breath, say a prayer that maybe this day my nightmare would be over, and walk into his room to see him covered in brown, with smears all over his crib, the walls, and himself. I tried putting footy PJs on him and safety pinning the zipper up, safety pinning the pants and a shirt together on him, cutting the feet off those PJs and putting them on backwards. I seriously thought about duct taping that damn diaper on him. Eventually he grew out of it, but I nearly lost my mind. I'm just so glad that I'm not alone. Anyone I talk to seems to think that no toddlers ever do this. I have twins, and one is the great Poopy Picasso, and the other one is unfortunately getting crap thrown at him like it's a monkey war zone. A few days ago I came in because I heard them playing instead of napping. Scat everywhere. I got them in the shower, got all the sheets and pillows in the wash, scrubbed everything, added new sheets, got the kids back in the crib. Picasso has taken off his diaper and done it again. He has no sheets right now. Just why? I was babysitting my friend's children, probably aged around 5 and 7 back then, and I caught the daughter, the 5-year-old, following her brother into the bathroom when he wanted to pee. The kids then informed me that she does it all the time because she likes to run her fingers in the stream of pee and then lick them because it's yummy. My daughter is not even 3, but she put a box of nerds down her diaper and stated that she was a rattle toy. Uncle to a rambunctious boy. When he was around 2, we found him laying around with a dog, English bulldog. Neither seemed like anything was wrong except for the dog jingling. My nephew had stuck my brother's car keys up the dog's butt, like all the way to the plastic knob. The dog seemed unfazed, and my nephew seemed proud that he had found the keyhole to start the dog. My friend used all the olive oil to tickle his pickle with. His parents never caught him, but his mum figured it out and told him to use lotion because it was cheaper. Something extra virgin. I have an 8-year-old son who has sleepovers with the kid down the block. I came downstairs and one had his head under the other's blanket. After the typical, "What the frick are you guys doing?" I found out they have a game where they smell one another's toots. I thought it was weird, then I remembered the same scene from Biodome. Not my kids, but babysitting my twin cousins recently. They're 5. They were arguing about something during a snack, and the boy twin suddenly got eerily calm. He goes into her bedroom, gets the terrarium for her anoles, the lizards you find in your gardens, and takes it outside. She starts screaming bloody murder. I'm completely confused. He turns to her through the glass door and proceeds to smash the tank against the ground. Just windmills his arms and wails the tiny box against the cement. No fluctuation in his emotion. I ran out to stop him, but the 5 or so little lizards in the tank were dead. I looked back at the other twin and she was sobbing into her hands. He just walked past her and sits down to continue eating his snack. My aunt told me that was the third time he's done that. Your aunt should frickin' do something about his behavior. This kind of emotional stuff is going to destroy the other twin. Agreed. And 1, he's harming animals, and 2, this isn't ripping up a drawing, this is a seriously violent act. Me and my 5-year-old son at the urinals. He's arguing that his pee-pee is bigger. It was at a hockey arena, so there were about 40 dudes laughing their butts off. Were they laughing because his was bigger? You were there, weren't you? My daughter, when 15 and heavily in piercings and death metal, decided to brand herself with a star shape on her arm. I didn't realize till the next day, still no idea how she managed the shape or not to scream. She still has the scars. Cripes, I did some pretty stupid stuff to try and change up my look when I was a kid, but never quite got around to branding myself with a presumably homemade, star-shaped red poker. I'm sweating just thinking about it. My youngest of 3 had just started walking. One day I found her hanging onto the bathroom toilet. I walked in and to my surprise, saw her with a handful of soggy toilet paper. Right as I scream her name, that little baby's hand reaches up into her mouth and she begins chewing it. One of my older kids forgot to flush and I panicked, having never experienced this with her bro or sis. I called poison control. They assured me that children ingest fecal matter often and she may have a stomachache but will be fine. Another time, same kid mind you, we're walking into a grocery store. I look down and say, her name, "Where did you get that gum you're chewing?" Her reply was, "On the ground." Ugh, she's by far my most disgusting child. My kids were pretty tame. I had one son scotch tape himself to the floor. I think he liked the sound of the tape coming off. Same son also built scotch tape footbridges between the countertops. My daughter snuck out one night and a friend who works nights saw her and called us. We were waiting on her bed when she climbed back in the window. God, that was a great parenting moment. My dad caught my sister sneaking back into the house with a ladder. "Why don't you just take the stairs?" was the only question he asked her. Those are the worst, when you know you're in deep crap but the parents don't sound mad. The uncertainty of your fate drives you crazy. Not a parent, but I've caught my younger brother, aged 3 to 5 at the time, on a stepping stool peeing into the air conditioning unit. I didn't so much catch him at it, it was more like he was doing it at me. He's 4 years old and we were having a bedtime battle where he simply wouldn't be quiet or stay in bed. He can really dig in his heels sometimes. I was getting really angry for the 4th or 5th time that night and I walked up to his doorway to tell him he needed to be quiet. He was ready for me with his pants off, his ankles up to his ears, and his butthole pointed directly at the doorway. He heard me when I stopped dead in my tracks and he looked between his legs at me with pure hate in his eyes. I gently told him to pipe down and went back to my room. I come back one more time for the same reason, and this time he was in the same position except he was sticking his finger in his butt. At me. Hatefully. He just sat there wordlessly mean-mugging me with his finger in his butt. That was probably the most messed up crap I've caught my kid doing. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to have a roommate that would help me with watching my daughter, even during times where I just needed a nap. One day I was napping and my roommate was watching my daughter, but my daughter headed back to her room. She didn't come out for a while, so my roommate went looking for her. She found my daughter in my room, standing over me with a toy knife, bringing it down over and over, whispering, "Stab, stab, stab, stab." My son was 5 and had started playing Skyrim on the Xbox 360. One afternoon, the neighbor called and asked if I could watch her son, also 5, for a few hours. They played with swords, shields, Nerf guns, typical boy games. At one point I stopped hearing them. That's always a dangerous thing with any child. You know something is going down. I opened the door very quietly and saw them on the floor. My son was now wearing his friend's shirt and pants, and the other boy was down to only his underwear. My first thought was, what the frick? But my son looked up at me with a sword in his hand and said, "We're playing Skyrim, and I just killed him, so I'm taking his stuff." All I could say was, "Okay, but let's try and keep all of our clothes on from now on." Well, from about the age of 2 to 5, I had a flock of imaginary ducks that used to follow me around. Apparently, we had to wait a good minute or so each day when getting into the car so all of my duck friends could come along. When asked about them, I would say that I am their king and they are here to follow me. But apparently it started getting weird when I'd pretend to break up fights between the ducks and cry when one died. Yep, I was a bit messed up. My brother hated bugs. We had cacti in our front yard. He would cut their heads off and skewer them all over the cacti, or he would take their heads and put their wings in their body where their heads would be. Vlad the Exterminator. Sent the boys to bed with popcorn for a fun treat. I heard maniacal laughter shortly thereafter. Go upstairs to find one of them sticking popcorn betwixt his cheeks and farting so it came out. Asked what was going on, and both boys in a panic tried to eat the evidence as mother and I watched horrified. Walked into the bathroom to find my son trying to put a piece of doody back up his butt because he thought his heart fell out. Not my kid, but my friend went back to pick up his little brother from his friend's house and no parents were home, so he walked up and found his brother and his friend holding each other's wee-wees. My friend is a third-grade teacher. He came to school one morning after having been out sick for a day and found that his classroom only had girls. Turns out all the boys had been suspended the day before for teabagging each other during recess. Walked in on my kid torturing an action figure with a lighter. Where are your rebel friends now? Ha 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 ha. That's not that uncommon, I guess. My friends and I did weird crap like that when we were kids. Like one time, we made a parachute for an action figure out of a shopping bag and some string, and then we taped a firecracker to his butt, lit it, and threw him on the floor of a 4-story building. Just because. Kids are strange. Reading this, I'm thinking kids are dangerous psychopaths who shouldn't be allowed alone with pets. Apparently, when I was little, I ran off in the buff towards the local golf course. I was also caught making my butthole breathe in front of the mirror. Oh, and I picked up my little sister by the head. I mean, the streaking at the golf course is just hilarious and kind of normal for kids, I think. The other two, a little weird but still not out of the ordinary. I have to assume the sister was okay for the author to post this. This is less messed up than just funny, but my cousin entered the bathroom to find her 2-year-old boy had covered himself in mummy's stickers. They weren't stickers, they were Kotex pads. And yes, there are photos. I finally remember a birthday party at my then-girlfriend's family when her 5-year-old cousin came down the stairs from the bathroom, happy as a clam and announcing to the world, "Mommy, I stuffed cotton balls into my butt just as you always do." Mommy was not happy with her son. I'm getting a vasectomy. I caught my daughter putting Tic Tacs in her butt because she wanted her next number 2 to smell good. My mum caught my little brother descaling their brand new goldfish at the kitchen table. It was disturbing from what I hear. Son here. You know those furious whack-offs you sometimes do purely to get your fun stick to settle down? Well, yeah, I'd been cooking cookies, listening to music. Nobody was home, so I thought, 1 minute till the cookies are done. I can do this. And I basically lay on the floor and furiously spanked the mule with all my might. Finished. Opened my eyes and behold my mum, arms full of shopping, in the doorway. We didn't speak for a while and I avoided eyesight. When I discovered you could download adult flicks on Kazaa, I skipped school. Turns out my sister skipped her last class and came home early. She walked in on me. Months later, I stupidly entered her room without knocking and I caught her in the act. She yelled out, "Now we're even." I guess she was right, but I still feel that was a weird thing to say. I've been told on numerous occasions about how when I was 3 or 4, as my parents and I were walking out of the old spaghetti factory, I turned to a table that had a black family in it, with a little black boy about my age, and I excitedly exclaimed, "Look, it's a basketball baby!" My parents told this story of when I was about 3 or 4. My sister was playing in her room one day and apparently came across a spider in her toy chest. Being a 5 to 6-year-old, she lost her mind and started screaming. That's when I supposedly learned what my life's calling was. As the story goes, I come barging into my sister's room and yell, "Don't worry, I'll hypnotize it with my wee-wee," and promptly dropped my pants. My dad laughed, my mother cried, and I defeated the spider. Not a parent, but my friend's little brother, who was 5 or 6 at the time, would strip down and chase me through the house with a kitchen knife. I was terrified of hanging out with my friend because of this. So after it happened 2 or 3 times, and one time his older brothers attacked me while wearing the Scream costume, I decided I wasn't going to his house anymore. My 3-year-old son asked this random woman in a store if she was scared in the fire. He said, "I saw you burning, but I couldn't help you." The woman turned as white as a sheet and explained to me that she had been in a terrible house fire when she was little, 50 years ago. It burned her hands and legs very badly. I was very creeped out at the time. I'm still not sure what the frick happened there. I don't know if it's messed up, but it messed me up a bit. Not a parent, but an older brother. When my younger sister's twins were about 2 or 3 years old, They filled the bathtub up with hot water, using only the red side of the two knobs, and took off their diapers and threw them in the tub. I heard from my mum that they inflated to huge dimensions. Oh, and the time one of them put an entire roll of toilet paper in the toilet, effectively clogging it. My sisters do weird crap together. My 3-year-old son figured out how to take selfies with an old iPad we had. Wife thought I'd be teed off. The pictures were hysterical, but not safe to show others. I wiped that iPad pretty fast, as it would be tough to explain the pics to people. Funny because he was all calm in the pictures. Batman undies, just one leg in, halfway up his leg as he posed for the camera. It was as though he knew exactly how he wanted to look in them. Not bad by any stretch, but my almost 2-year-old daughter has a sheep comfort toy that she loves. Can't go to sleep without him. Whenever she's upset, she just calls for him. Came home to the sheep's disemboweled husk. Apparently he had a small tear, and she went to town on him. I hate to think what she'd do to someone she hates after seeing what she did to her best friend. Happy ending though, I managed to stitch him up good as new. I used to enjoy tickling my pickle in the shower with a rubber on, and once I left the used rubber behind and my mum found it. Awkward conversation after when I had to explain that I didn't even have a girl over. When I was a kid, like 5, I went through a phase where I'd convinced myself I was the only real person in the world and that my parents, teachers, and friends were all just constructs in my own world that I created. I remember saying stuff to my mum and teacher along the lines of, "You can't do anything to me that I don't want you to do. I made you." I remember thinking at the time that it was strange that I would choose to have one of my constructs punish me. I decided that I was doing it because life would get boring if it was too easy. I eventually got over all this. I caught my 1-year-old with something in her mouth. By the time I said to her, "What do you have?" she'd crunched on it a few times and then spit it out. I went over to investigate and was horrified to see that she'd spit out a lizard head. A fricking lizard head in her mouth. Ugh. I guess the cats brought it in and ate the rest of it. She just happened to find the head before I saw. Nasty. Not a parent, but when I was helping my 9 years younger sister clean her room, I found a pouch where she was storing dead flies. Not my kids, but me. I dumped all of my mum's medicine in the car vents. When my mum saw me with empty medicine bottles, she freaked out and took me to the hospital, assuming I ate them all. My brother shot me with a bow. He also tried to stab me several times, succeeding in many of them. To be fair, I did tie him to cinder blocks and throw him in the pool, also hanged him upside down from a tree, buried him alive in a plywood coffin for a bit. He smacked my legs with a baseball bat for that one. Good times, good times. Are you and your brother Wednesday and Pugsley Adams by any chance? My grandma tells me a story about how my uncle threw himself down the stairs in the morning so he wouldn't have to go to school. Grandma took him to the hospital, got a cast on his arm, fed him, and then dropped him off at school. What was your craziest, "I thought about it and it happened" story? When I was 17, a friend and I were driving around town in his 80-something Toyota Tercel. This car was a total piece of crap and had had a seriously loud knock in the engine for weeks. We had been out tooling around for maybe an hour and the knocking noise was getting to me. We're sitting at a red light in the center of a 3-lane road about 20 minutes from home when I exclaimed, "Wouldn't it be some crap if this piece of crap car just went bang and blew the hell up?" As the light turns green, my friend chuckled and said something like, "Yeah, that would suck." The car in front of us starts to move and my buddy pushes the gas and bang! That piece of crap threw a piston and died right in the middle of the road. He looked at me like, "What the frick did you do that for?" And we both laughed our butts off for a few seconds. We pushed his car into a nearby church parking lot with the help of a few onlookers and took the plates off and left it there. That was over a decade ago, and as far as I know, he never heard another thing about it. No idea what eventually became of that car. I worked at a Starbucks in a Lucky grocery store. We had a guy that would come in 4 to 5 times a week and get a small coffee. We'd give it to him for the refill price, and he'd sit in the store for hours. He was homeless and smelled pretty bad and was pretty scruffy looking with long hair and a beard, but he seemed nice enough. After like a year of this, the store manager came to me and told me that if I saw Nathan, the homeless guy, to call the store manager because he wanted to talk to him. That night I had a dream that I was at work and Nathan was there as well, but as an employee. Nothing super eventful about the dream until I went to work the next day and saw we had a new employee. He was sitting at the table in front of the Starbucks kiosk and one of my coworkers was talking to him. I didn't really pay much attention until my coworker called me over and said, "Doesn't he look completely different without his beard?" Mind blown. Apparently, my store manager figured out that if he was going to be chilling in the store all day, he might as well give him a job. He bought him some clothes, got him a haircut and a shave, a gym membership for showers, and started helping him look for a place to stay. I never really had a positive or negative opinion on the store manager before that point, but mad respect for that. 5 years later, Nathan still works there. He outlasted me. A few years ago, I was going to the grocery store with my dad, and I asked him, "Is there any part of the body that can't get cancer?" "I don't know, we'll have to look it up later." Later, getting back into the car, we turn on the radio. It's Tuesday, which means it's time for our trivia fact of the week. The lens of the eye is the only body part that cannot get cancer. I really thought that story was going to end with one of you getting cancer of the right buttock or something. Me too, commenter. I was honestly kind of dreading whatever the outcome here was, but this is much better. I would never believe this story had happened if I wasn't present for it. When I was in high school, me and a buddy were driving back from Long Beach with his mum. About halfway home, this butthole starts riding his mum's rear bumper. She gets really nervous and tries to get out of his way by changing lanes. The jerk guns it and changes lanes around her, scaring the crap out of us and nearly forcing her into the center divider. Well, he gets in front of us and slows the frick down to like 1 mile per hour higher than we're going, and my friend's mum is almost in tears and is just screaming, "What the frick, butthole?" So my buddy goes, "Don't worry about it, Mum. We'll all laugh our butts off when he blows his tire and wrecks his car right now." The words had barely left his mouth when, boom! His left front tire completely blows and he tanks his crappy Nissan right into the K-rail. We had to swerve to avoid hitting him. Needless to say, it was an eerie ride home. Watching Jeopardy, the final Jeopardy subject was science. During the commercial break, I said, "I bet it's tungsten." The answer was tungsten. I had this at a pub quiz once. The quizmaster explained that in the next round, each question would be a line from a song, and the answer was the next line of the song. Before a single line was read out, I wrote, "Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality," in the answer space for question 1. I was right. I had a recurring dream when I was a little kid. I would be sitting on my dad's shoulders and would be walking down this really narrow hallway. For some reason, I had this inherent knowledge that there were monsters in it, but my dad kept them away. The dream always ended before we got out. When I was 5, I had the same dream, except we got to the end of the hallway, and my dad just suddenly disappeared. I looked for him for a while, but to no avail. I woke up and found out he had died while I was sleeping. When I was 11, my grandpa had been sick for a while, and he was in the hospital. One weekend, I was at a friend's place about an hour and a half from home. Everything was fine, but I suddenly just knew something wasn't right. I called my mom and she assured me that everything was fine and my grandpa was stable. I still convinced my friend's mom to drive me home right away though, and I made her drive me to my grandparents instead of home. Sure enough, when I got there, my whole family was there and my grandpa had just passed away. I found out afterwards that when I'd called my mom, it had just happened about 5 minutes before, but she didn't want to break the news to me over the phone. When I was in first grade, we were playing a Jeopardy-style game with actual buzzers. The rules of the game were that if you buzz in too early, you have to answer the question anyway and don't get another chance at it. Well, a question had just finished and it was that transition period between questions. As soon as the teacher was about to say the first word of the next question, I hit my buzzer unknowingly. My teacher stopped herself from reading the question and looked at me for an answer. I said, "Triangle." I was right. I was about 6 years old and playing with my brand new pet bunny rabbits that my dad bought for me after church. I turned to him and said, "Daddy, I'm glad that you and Mummy are still married. So many of my friends' parents are divorced." My dad responds, "Actually, there's something we need to talk about." And that's how I learned my parents were getting divorced. I fell in love with a girl freshman year of college and we were together until the end of sophomore year. We reached a breaking point because she came from a very traditional Indian family, and she was very in favor of being married young. I loved her like crazy, but at the same time I knew I wasn't ready for all that she was hoping for, and I didn't think it was fair to keep getting her hopes up that way. I was 20 years old and I'd never had a job for God's sakes. It was a brutal breakup because as much as I tried to explain myself, any girl will take that as a rejection, as saying somehow that she wasn't good enough. We were both pretty heartbroken, but we realized eventually that trying to be friends would only make things harder, so we agreed to not talk anymore. One of the last things I said that it wasn't impossible for it to work out someday, but we both needed to try and live on our own for a while and give a chance for being with other people. We were both kind of over-dependent on each other and we both needed to mature and learn to be our own person. We lost touch for 2 years, saw each other very rarely and spoke not at all. We dated other people. At the end of senior year, I'd just gotten out of a really bad relationship where I'd been cheated on. It wasn't that bad because I wasn't really in love with the girl, but it still felt crappy. The week before exams, I had a dream about the old girl where we ran into each other at this little coffee shop we always used to go to and read and hang out in. In the dream, all we did was talk and hold hands a little. The next day, I picked up the books I needed to study and went to that coffee shop. 15 minutes later, she walked in and sat down without seeing me. She was studying too. I walked up to the counter and brought another drink and looked over just to be sure it was her. I couldn't believe it. She saw me, and of course at that point it was impossible not to say hello. We talked for 2 hours. She had had some bad relationships too. We found out we had gotten jobs in the same city. We didn't hold hands because that would have been bizarre, but we could both feel it. Dated, married, been together 5 years. I don't believe in God, but I still can't believe how perfectly things worked out. A lot of these are about speaking disasters or tragedies into existence, or coincidences of those nature, so it's nice to get another cute one in. When I was 14 or 15, I was sitting with this girl I'd just started hanging out with. We're waiting for our ride home, and she talks about missing her brother, and I said something about him showing up for Christmas, not realizing he was very estranged, 3 years, from the family. Awkward moments ensue, we get rides home, no big deal. Flash forward to 7 a.m. Christmas morning, she calls me freaking out because he showed up at the family door. The first laptop I ordered arrived a day early when I was out of the house, so I came home to find the little slip on my door saying they'd try again tomorrow. The next day I woke up only to find that I'd slept in and missed the shipment again. I was pretty annoyed, but just set my alarm for the next day. For some reason, I missed the FedEx guy for the 3rd day in a row and I'm just fuming. I decide to go for a run to vent my anger, and while running I think to myself, wouldn't it be awesome if I saw the FedEx truck and got my laptop? After half an hour, I turn the corner of an intersection and see the FedEx truck and the FedEx guy walking towards it. I excitedly dash up to him and explain my situation to him while gasping for air. He remembers the package, finds it, and then hands it to me after I sign for it. Such a good day. Sitting in class, Professor pulls up Windows Media Player to play us a video on improper call signaling. He pauses with the mouse hovering over Resume Previous Playlist button, and I think, oh crap, what if it's adult flicks? That'd be hilarious. Turns out it was more than just that. It was some intense butt action with a ridiculously huge marital aid. I laughed very hard. My friend showed me a picture of his new girlfriend. I told him, damn, Ronald, once she realizes she's too hot for you, it's over, man. She broke up with him the next day. He has looked at me accusingly ever since. Sitting at lunch with some change, I asked my friend, how many times on average do you think I'd have to toss these coins for them to all land on heads? I had about 7 or 8 coins. He starts getting into the math required and thinking out loud about it. I comment, I bet it's just 1, and I tossed the coins. They all end up heads. Yeah, I was right. It was only 1. During post-party night walking, I told a friend who was walking on the empty road, you're going to die. For the first time in his life, he listened to me, did a step to his left, and got back to safety. 2 seconds later, a car traveling at more than 130 kilometers per hour came out from nowhere and plowed through the space he had been standing in 2 seconds prior. Final Destination 6. I mean, he's still gonna die now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was about 8. My teacher had asked me to deliver an envelope of some sort to the principal's office in the middle of the school day. My school had at its center a single long hall, with my classroom near one end and the principal's office at the other. As a child, the hall seemed absurdly long, like a mile. Class was in session, so I was walking down this hall all alone, my footsteps echoing, quite surreal. It suddenly occurred to me that I was walking quite close to one wall, and that if a teacher were to fling open their doors, I'd be knocked silly. Just then, a teacher flung open her door, knocking me silly. These were big, old, heavy doors, and the energy transfer to my head was significant. In my memory, both my feet left the ground, though this seems unlikely in retrospect. I landed on my butt and was momentarily stunned. Our eyes locked, the teacher's and mine, for an instant, then I burst out laughing uncontrollably. The synchronicity struck me as hilarious, even the pain of being cold-cocked by a massive school door couldn't suppress my hilarity. I believe my reaction led the teacher to believe I'd suffered brain damage. It took quite some time to convince the various concerned school officials that I was unharmed, if silly. I was talking with a group of friends outside of an Expendables show in Santa Cruz. We were smoking cigs and making jokes when one of my buddies gets our attention and says, "Watch this, I'm gonna pull this girl's shirt down with my mind." He made a funny concentrating face and we all laughed and looked at the girl about 15 feet away from us on the porch. She was mid-conversation with what looked like a good friend, who was male, and slowly but surely her loose top slid over. With each hand motion or exclamation, her top inched over slightly. After about a minute and a half, her right fun chest bit was fully exposed. We cheered and laughed and couldn't believe it. The guy who was talking to her noticed but was too embarrassed to say anything. She finally put it away when some chick from a nearby table made a comment about it so loud that she took notice. But she was standing there with one of her tots out for a good few minutes. By the end of it, everyone on the porch was looking at it. She was a really hot girl with a great mid-sized rack, so I guess that happens a lot. People staring. I kind of felt bad because she got really embarrassed, but wow, it was funny. In college, I was watching Eurotrip with my buddy. The Pope had been sick, and during the part where they make Vatican City think the Pope is dead, I turned to my friend and said, "Man, wouldn't it be weird if the Pope died while we were watching this?" His time of death was almost exactly then. I found out the next day. In short, I killed Pope John Paul II. Wait until the Catholics hear about this one. You're in for it, Buster. Every time I say, I thought, insert celebrity name here, was dead, they die 3 days later. Unfortunately, I have to actually believe they were dead. I've said I thought Tom Cruise was dead about 7 times and nothing has happened. I'm really sorry about Johnny Cash, though. Quickly, someone convince this person that James Corden is dead. Stat! Oh, I'm kidding. Mostly. Not really pre-thought or said, but it was the craziest thing ever. My friend and I were at Fridays, and he was being super rambunctious and obnoxious while eating his salad. For some reason, he thought it would be a good idea to poke a tomato with his fork and then fling it at me as hard as he could. Drawing his fork up past his shoulder, my friend seriously whipped his tomato across the table with all his might. My first reaction was to sort of turn my head, anticipating the thwack sound the wet vegetable would make as it hit me. But that sound never came, there was no sudden thud, and no tomato hit me. I sat there fork in hand wondering what the frick happened. Somehow that giant hunk of tomato had zoomed across the table and stuck itself onto my fork in the exact same way it was on his. Had we been professional lacrosse players planning the perfect pass, we could never have executed it as flawlessly as had happened. It was the most beautiful demonstration of Newtonian physics my then 17-year-old self had ever experienced. And yes, a tomato is a fruit. I made an error. But guess what? I'm not changing the story. Went to college and worked at a grocery store in Bellingham, Washington State. My co-workers and I were talking in the break room before a shift and the subject of celebrities came up. We talked about how celebrities might be a-holes because they had to deal with sycophants constantly bothering them. Then someone brought up Ryan Stiles, who lives near Bellingham and is owner of the Upfront Theatre, and how he would never shop at the store by the college campus, probably because he doesn't want to be hassled by college noobs. After our conversation, we left to go to our check stands, and within a few minutes, Ryan Stiles walks in. Unbelievable. Regular guy, wears blue jeans, sneakers, and a casual shirt. Really nice too. I was hoping I'd get to help him just to see if he would say something funny, but my friend did instead. About 7 years ago, I was still in high school and living with my mum, my brother, and my younger sister. My parents got a divorce about a year and a half before, and my dad kind of screwed us. My mum was unemployed, but going back to school with less than a year of schooling left. She was 48 at the time. We had no money, no food, no nothing. We've always been a poor family growing up, so it wasn't anything new. Unfortunately, we couldn't live where we were living anymore and had to move. This was the first move without my dad, so it was kind of the toughest. I remember day after day, my mum would cry wondering how she would feed us, move the house, care for us, get money for bills and other things. I remember asking her what we were going to do or how we'd pay for anything. She had no answer. She went to get the mail a day after. She always avoided the mailbox because of bills, and when she did, she found a letter with a check in it for $6,000. She was employed at an insurance firm where she'd met my dad some 20 years earlier, and as a perk for working there, you're given stock options. My mum forgot about the stock options, and they tracked her down 20 years later to give her the money, and single-handedly saved us from being homeless. My mum made that $6,000 go a long way. We happily moved to a cheaper home and everything is okay again. We were at a poker table playing poker once and I was winning $100 to $150 from my mates. The dealer was next to me and he was like, "Man, you're totally cheating." He was joking, of course. He was dealing the community cards and I was like, "Next card is the 3 of spades." Next card was the 3 of spades. Best moment ever. When I was a kid, every time I thought about a certain episode of The Simpsons, it was the one that would come on that evening. For example, I would imagine a scene or joke from the one where Lisa gets braces, and it would come on. I thought I was psychic, but I never could use my power for good. Sometimes I pretend like I have a bazooka. This happens when I'm in the car with my girlfriend on our frequent and boring 4-hour trips to home and back from college. Well, one time I shot my imaginary bazooka at a car in front of me. A second later, his tire blows out and he swerves off to the shoulder, staring at me all the while. He was probably as confused as I was. When I was about 8 or 9, my family went for a walk, driving our huge 15-passenger red van to the path. Mind you, this is a small walking path in the middle of nowhere that no one knows about except for our family and a few quad riders. For some reason, when my dad closed the door of the van, I got terrified that someone would steal our car. Obviously, none of my older brothers or sisters wanted to listen to a whining 8-year-old. After the walk, we came back and, as guessed, the van was gone. Disappeared. After filing a report with the local cops, we got rides back home and waited. Turned out the thief just needed a way to drive a few friends to an amusement park. The van was found a week later in the parking lot of Kennywood. One night I was stargazing while being outside for a smoke and saw a shooting star between two prominent landmarks. A few days later, I was outside again at the same spot and I remembered the shooting star and thought how cool it would be to see it again. A few seconds later, a shooting star crossed that same spot. Oh, and one time I predicted a joke on 2.5 Men. That isn't that hard though. You're not wrong. I don't think I saw a single funny or original joke in the one time I was subjected to that awful show. Come at me, haters. One time about 10 years ago, my buddy and I were about 15 or 16 at the time. We were standing on his front lawn waiting for my mum to pick me up when we heard a guy screech his tires and spin out on the top of the road leading to his house. Looked like he was trying to do donuts. We both looked up there thinking it was a car accident about to happen, but it was nothing, so I said, I got excited. Would have been great to see that guy crash into a pole, for some cheap laughs. This guy couldn't have been moving faster than 10 miles an hour, so it would have ruined his day and nothing more. The guy straightens out and drives down the hill and then completely loses control of his car and slams it into a telephone pole about 30 feet from where we were standing. It was hair-raising. We still laugh about it to this day. Another one was about this guy I knew a while ago. He wasn't such a bad guy, but he had an abrasive side and he liked to rib me for a lot of little things. At first I didn't mind so much, but after a few months of it I got pretty tired of him. My friend brought him up in conversation one night in front of a bunch of people, and as a show of disapproval of him, I said, if he died tomorrow, I wouldn't care. Well, guess what happened the next morning? He died in a motorcycle crash after some butthole doped up on pills and driving on the wrong side of the road nailed him on a blind turn. I still feel crappy about the timing. Sat outside college with some friends when several police cars appeared very suddenly, surrounding a car in the middle of the road and forcing them to stop. One of my friends said sarcastically, "Watch, they'll get the automatic weapons out next." Now, this is the north of England. It's not all that often you see the police wield any sort of firearm around here. But sure enough, 6 or 7 officers arose from their vehicles with MP5s and pointed them straight at the back of the car they'd stopped. They dragged a man out of the car and put him in the back of one of the police cars. One of the officers got into the car they'd stopped and they all drove away. The whole thing lasted about 30 or 40 seconds, and we were all sat about 10 feet away. On September 11th, I said to a coworker, wouldn't it be crazy if another plane hit the tower? I was at the game in 1998 that Kerry Wood struck out 20 batters. After he struck out the first hitter in the first inning, my friend looked at me and said, well, only 19 more to go. By the 9th inning, we had our entire section going insane as we counted down the last 2 strikeouts to 20. People with plastic surgery, do you regret it or are you happy with your decision? I had a few scary spots on my back when I was about 13. When I got them removed, my mum told the doctors to go ahead and get rid of the birthmark that was located on my left butt cheek. I guess she thought it was big, but I kinda liked it. It was shaped like a perfect leaf, which I thought was pretty cool. Anyways, they took it and it left a scar that kinda looks like someone took a small bite out of my butt. There was just this big dent for a long time. It's still a dent, but not as big. Hopefully it goes away eventually. I'm not happy with it. I have a dent in my butt and I miss my leaf birthmark. I had jaw surgery about 1.5 years ago, radically changing my bite and essentially giving me a chin. I don't regret. I can't imagine my life if I hadn't had it done. I'd been wanting the surgery since I was 11. I got the surgery when I was 18.5, right after graduating high school. It aligned my teeth correctly. I'd had a decade of orthodontic work prior to that, braces, a spreader, spacer, headgear, chains, and retainer. Recovery went well. While in there, the doctor brought my chin forward and adjusted my nose. While my nose looks better, I've never had a nosebleed since, after a lifetime of them. I did the same thing. My mandible jutted out significantly further than my maxilla, and the midlines of the upper and lower jaws were not in line. While I can mostly justify the surgery as being functional, after all it has significantly reduced jaw pain and clicking, it has brought symmetry to my face that I couldn't be happier about. I've had a tummy tuck, double brachioplasty, breast reduction, and a neck lift after losing 160 pounds. And as painful as they were, I'm much, much happier and more self-confident. I messed up my body when I was young and wanted to not spend the rest of my youth in a sack of extra skin. I'm very, very self-conscious about doing this, but hopefully people can understand what a change it's made in my self-esteem. I'm still not perfect, but I'm proud of how far I've come. Please don't make fun of me. You just gave me the nudge to jump on board my sister having a similar procedure. She dropped over 100 pounds in less than a year, got divorced, and really wants some family support to have a chest lift, tummy tuck, and maybe more. I thought she was being a little vain until we went shopping together, and I realized she was holding it all together with special undies. She really has a lot of skin, stretch marks, and scars, especially in her abdominal region. She wants to get back to the dating pool, but is afraid for someone to see her undressed. Yeah, I suppose this kind of surgery isn't so much I want to look hot as I want to help myself overcome something. If someone has undergone something like this kind of weight loss and has the finances, it can be a great gift for yourself. I'm actually having plastic surgery in a few months. When I was a freshman in high school, I broke my nose playing basketball and actually dislocated my septum. It healed badly and now I have a lot of breathing problems, and it's also pretty crooked. Think one standard deviation away from Owen Wilson. When they go in to fix the septum, they're going to do a bit of cosmetic work and straighten and smooth it out. Obviously, I can't tell if I'm going to regret it yet, as I haven't had it, but I can say that when I tell people I'm having it done, they all tell me it's not necessary and that I look fine the way I am. Which is nice, but a bit annoying. Hopefully the surgery will go well and I'll look like I did 8 years ago before my nose got smashed in. Oh, you're like me. The surgery itself is not the most fun thing ever. Just make sure you have at least a week to recover and lots of pain pills. The actual surgery to correct the deviated septum is pretty life-changing. I really enjoy being able to breathe through my nose, and it's something I can't take for granted anymore. I think I'm pretty happy getting the cosmetic work done. I never think about it now, several years later. My nose was so messed up that I didn't think of it as my real nose anymore, if that makes sense. So overall, it's not fun at the time, but worth it in the long run. Let me know if you have any questions, and good luck. I just recently had a rhinoplasty. I used to feel so self-conscious about people seeing me from profile view, and I still catch myself feeling anxious, and I remember I don't look like that anymore, and it makes me want to cry happy tears. I think I might want a rhinoplasty, but my nose is the family nose, and we've all somehow bonded over this ridiculous schnoz. I think my family would take it as a personal slight if I had it reduced, and they would definitely make fun of me literally forever. I had a tummy tuck and my abs reconstructed after losing over 100 pounds. I have no regrets at all and it still makes me smile every day. It's been almost 10 years and I'm still so happy I did it. Had a male chest reduction surgery when I was 15. Apparently one of the most common cosmetic surgeries, but still has a stigma of embarrassment around it, which is a shame because it completely changed me for the better. My confidence boosted tenfold and I have zero regrets. Would do it again in a heartbeat. Now a normal, non-breasted 26-year-old with a great trivia fact about myself. The only shameful thing is that it isn't covered by insurance. In short, not having moobs is great. Do you have an explanation as to why you had moobs as a 15-year-old male? I'm genuinely curious. I do. It's called gynecomastia, and it manifests to some extent in a large percent of males as they go through puberty, though it typically goes away within a year or so. I was one of the lucky few. I had actual chest tissue, or chest bud, I believe they call it, which led to puffy, enlarged nipples, in addition to more common fatty tissue that made the whole moob part bigger. They temporarily detached my nipples to surgically remove the breast tissue, and then I had lipo via my armpit to remove the remaining fat. It was such a successful surgery and recovery that now it seems weird that it actually happened. A good female friend had eyelid surgery. Before, she always looked tired and had large bags under her eyes. She found a surgeon that recommended the most minimal removal of excess skin from her eyelids and area under eyes. I was pleasantly surprised that the surgeon didn't go overboard. As he stated, "We don't want to change your looks, just make you look refreshed." The surgeon did a great job and my friend couldn't be happier. I had a form of gastric bypass surgery called duodenal switch. It's like a plastic surgery just designed for weight loss. Best decision I ever made. Congratulations on your weight loss. Any complications? Yeah, my number 2s now smell so bad that I can clear an entire floor of a Chicago high-rise. Not joking. I lost more than 80 pounds and 2 years later I had a mummy makeover. Chest lift, no implants, and tummy tuck. I look better now than I did before 3 kids and gaining 80 pounds. 2 years since my surgery and I'm still super stoked. I had PRK eye surgery about 6 years ago. It was considered cosmetic as I didn't have astigmatism or corneal erosions or anything. It was incredibly painful, and since my eyes are a lot more sensitive, things like cutting onion and chili are very difficult now, and I get very itchy eyes during hay fever season. But I went from a prescription of I think about -6 to 0. I couldn't see further than about 4 inches in front of my face without glasses. I wore contact lenses, but hated that I could never be spontaneous. Things other people take for granted, like staying at a friend's house overnight, jumping into a pool without thinking about it, learning to surf or rolling over and looking at my partner first thing in the morning, I can now do those things. I don't have to switch between sunglasses and prescription glasses. I don't have to pay for new frames and lenses every few months or whatever. I feel free in a way that I wasn't before, but it wasn't a pain-free process, and it comes with its own set of negatives. Still, I'm so glad that I did it. -6 is one heck of a short distance. One day the narrator feels like they'll get LASIK or a similar procedure if they can afford it. Good to know about the potential issues. I've had 16 plastic surgeries, the majority of which would be classed as cosmetic. I was born with a congenital melanocytic nevus on half my face and into my scalp region. 6 or so surgeries were done to do skin grafts replacing the nevus with skin from my back and removing satellite nevuses, smaller nevi scattered like large moles. Later surgeries were to implant expanders and grow skin to replace the grafts and fix my hairline and brow region, as well as scar revisions and fat injections into my right brow, where I now have no eyebrows or muscles. No regrets, it was a painstaking process, but I've reached the point where I'm happy with how I look. I don't fear what others think, and although I'll always look different, the surgeries have helped me gain control of my own identity and how I see myself as a person. Oh, I actually wrote a paper back in college about this. I interviewed 16 Asian women on their thoughts on plastic surgery as well as their relationship with their parents, if that impacted their decisions to get or not get plastic surgery. Out of the 16, 3 had plastic surgery already. We'll call them A, B, and C. A had done it for their eyes and nose, vehemently denies it even though it's relatively common knowledge since she went to finishing school for a year, and came back looking radically different. She didn't have a crease above her eyes or a nose bridge before the finishing school and had them after. Out of respect for her feelings, I didn't pursue the topic. B had had her eyes done, regretted it since she became a feminist and political activist in college, felt very embarrassed about the fact that she talks about Asian pride while she had the eyelid surgery to remove a distinctly Asian feature. Deeply regrets it since her mum was the one who forced her into it. She went to the doctor thinking she was going to a dermatologist, and the doctor started talking about surgery, and she ran out, freaked out. Her mum dragged her back in, yelled at her, and told her she's ugly and needed to fix her eyes. She succumbed to the pressure and did it. Her mum took her to Vietnam, so I guess patient consent may be sketchy in some clinics. She still hates her mum for it. She had a traumatic surgery too, where the stitches popped afterwards. C also had her eyelids done. Her mum was the one who told her to do it too, and according to her, it's the best thing she ever did to me. Craziest interview I had, and most awesome quote. Sometimes you need someone to tell you you're ugly, and that's where your mum comes in. Like I'll be gaining so much weight, but I'm in denial and no one points it out. My mum would just go, "Oh my god, you look like a balloon." And I'll be like, "Oh my god, you're right." And then I go diet and fix the problem. Subject C wanted to do her nose next, but her boyfriend, and now husband, threatened to break up if she did any more plastic surgery. I got into the paper because I grew up with parents telling me I needed surgery to fix my eyes. I have the Asian monolid. I know it's relatively common for traditional Asian parents from Asia to do that, so I wanted to know just how common it was. The Asian American women I interviewed were all against plastic surgery, but my sample size is still too small, read 8. The Asian women from Asia that I interviewed, also 8, were international students from Korea, Indonesia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Japan. 1 had dual nationality and 5 grew up in 2 different Asian countries. One of the Asian women from Asia gave me the best quote. "I don't think the eyelid surgery counts as surgery, it's something every girl has to go through, like dyeing your hair." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I have hair transplants. They're perfect. Nobody has ever been able to tell, even when I'm getting haircuts. I paid more than double what some guys pay, but it was worth it. Supposedly, my doctor also did Don Johnson's. Yeah, I'm glad I got them. I asked a long-term girlfriend before, if I was bald, would you have dated me? And she said no. That's not to say some guys don't look great bald, but I didn't. By the way, there are 2 big negatives. 1, I have a scar that goes ear to ear, so I can never shave my head again, unless I want to start telling people I was bit by a shark. I also had to tell my barber to use a number 4 setting with the clippers. Anything shorter and the scar becomes noticeable. 2. If you do the surgery 3 times, you'll have a full head of hair in the front, but in the back you'll have to grow long hair from the top of your head to the bottom to make a fake hairline. This looks awful from the back. I can spot it on other guys. I only had mine done once, so I don't have this problem, but now I have a seriously receding hairline on the corners of the front. I need to have that filled in, but whatever, I'll probably wait for a different kind of therapy. I've had a perineoplasty to correct some scar tissue from having kids that made doing the deed very painful, and the recovery wasn't something I would wish on my worst enemy. It was awful, but no more pain while doing the deed, so it was worth it. I also ended up having an abdominoplasty and chest job. I have a petite frame, and my 3 kids were huge. They destroyed my stomach muscles, and I ended up looking about 4 months preggo for years. I tried working with a trainer to help my stomach, but nothing was helping, and I was in physical therapy for back pain. They ended up sewing my stomach muscles back together and went ahead and tightened the skin. We figured while we were in there, I'd go ahead and get the chest done. Before kids, I was a full B, and now I'm a full C. I'm beyond happy about my stomach, even with the scar. I don't have any more back pain, and I feel so much better now just wearing clothes. The melons I could take or leave, they look great in clothes, but I'm still getting used to them. It's been 9 months. My husband loves them, so I'm happy about that. My grandma had a chest job, tummy tuck, and a butt job. She's pretty happy. Not as happy as my grandpa, though. Get it, Grandma? Is it weird to have a grandma with a fantastic rack? She went from having nothing to being decked out, so you could say it was a bit of a change. Why not, I guess? As the commenter said, you get it, Grandma. May as well have a good bedroom life in your twilight years. I was born a stick-thin girl who happens to have a huge butt. Like it was the only thing about me. And it was huge. It got me a lot of unwanted attention from men as a teenager, and people would make fun of me at school, and the negative attention, and creepy positive attention, genuinely made me want to self-delete. I was so shy and just wanted to blend into the crowd, and not be leered at by strangers. So when I was 17, I wrote a letter to my mum about how depressed I was about my body, and I was too afraid to give it to her, and hid it in my desk, where my dad found it and my mum talked to me about it. So the summer before last year of high school, I wound up getting liposuction on my butt, hips, and thighs. Not much, but enough that I don't get the catcalls and unwanted attention anymore. I feel more comfortable in my own skin. The guys I've been undressed around have never noticed my super tiny scars, even after I've told them about the procedure. The only thing that sucked was the garment I had to wear under my clothes for a few months. It was hard going to school in that, but yeah, 1,000,000% satisfied. During an anthropology class, we were on the discussion of plastic surgery with the good majority of the students bashing it for whatever various reasons they have, when one of the girls in class piped up that she had had chest augmentation done and her reasoning behind it. She said her chest was as flat as a preteen boy's and just wanted something to be there. She only upgraded to a bigger A cup and wore somewhat reserved clothes. She really changed the perspective of a lot of students because she showed that plastic surgery can be good for people and not just a bunch of 40-year-olds desperate for another way to look young. I had gynecomastia surgery when I was 26, one of the best decisions of my life. I used to walk hunched over, wear multiple layers of dark clothing, and never ever swam or changed in front of anyone. Seatbelts, bag straps, and the wind pushed my clothes up against me, showing you the moobs, were all my enemies. The surgery was 1 hour long, and it has helped my self-confidence and happiness to a great degree. Looking in the mirror is no longer a heart-plummeting affair. If any other guys are out there thinking about it, take the plunge. It's worth it. This girl I know had her nose done a year or so ago. I'm of the opinion that cosmetic surgery is understandable in some cases. It really made a difference for her because she had a huge nose and it was obviously bothering her. So she had it redone, and to be completely honest, she was already attractive before, despite the big nose, and she's even more attractive now, partly due to the fact that her confidence and general demeanor has gone through the roof since. And the nose itself looks completely normal. If you didn't know she'd had surgery on it, you'd never guess. She's not afraid to talk about it and has clearly said she's not interested in getting any more surgery. Like I said, in some cases, I think it's understandable, and in her case, it seemed like a very positive experience. I had plastic surgery done to cover a hole in the middle of my foot when I was 3. Obviously, I have no regrets. On a side note, I hate that people use the term plastic surgery when they mean cosmetic surgery. I had something more common done, which was mole removal on my face, on my chin. A small one at that. The wound got infected and it was pain at the time, but I'm 100% satisfied and forgot the thing ever existed. If it's something small like that, go and do it. I had a cyst the size of 2 large walnuts on my cheek. Plastic surgeon removed it in a 5-hour surgery. Amazingly skilled doctor managed to unwrap the cyst from all my facial nerves without damaging any. 52 stitches and some injections later, and my cheek looks like I have a natural dimple. Thank you, Asian doctor, and your excellent dexterity. Yes, very happy. Ladies love my dimple. I had a facelift, lip implants, cheek implants, chin implant, brow shave, lip shortening, chest augmentation, all done at the same time. Also, orchidectomy, but that wasn't cosmetic. I'm trans and was not passable, and the surgery basically improved my life 100-fold. I went from constantly fearful and inverted to sociable and happy. It pretty much saved my life. All this was done almost exactly a year ago. I totally regret mine, had a chest enlargement, surgeon ended up making me bigger than I wanted, which may also be exacerbated by the part where I lost 20 pounds after surgery. So they're even bigger in relation. I went from a small B to a D or double D depending on the bra. I hate the attention, I hate how clothes fit because you can't wear anything loose without looking like a cow. Plus I now have back and neck pain. I'll have them removed or reduced as soon as I have the money. It seems surgeries that remove or adjust something that make you uncomfortable about your appearance or function are a more positive experience than purely cosmetic surgeries to boost you. Makes sense as a very general trend, I guess, and please, do your own research and don't take the word of a YouTube narrator as life advice. My best friend had a facelift in her late 30s. I think she made a terrible decision. She complained for a long time about her face sagging and would constantly do somewhat of a duck face, but like cheek-biting face in pictures. She still does it, but not to the same degree. I think there's a lot more to it psychologically than just fixing her face. Anyways, turns out she was severely allergic to the dissolving stitches which caused the wounds next to the earlobe to become infected. You could see the scarring, but it was nothing all that bad. I mean, not to the extent it is now. Anyways, she was really self-conscious about the scarring, so she decided she'd go in and have them redo the procedure. They redid it, and it left a huge stretch mark across her cheek and stretched her face to the point it looks as though she's not had cheek definition. I can't really explain it, but it sure looks odd. The worst part of it though, because there was not enough skin to reattach the side of her ear and earlobe, they stretched the earlobe so much that on one side of her face it's essentially attached to her earlobe that's attached to her jaw. The other side is bad, but nothing like the other. It's called pixie ears. She's super self-conscious about it and wears her hair in front of it all the time, and it looks terrible. All in all, she looks thinner because of her face, but you can really notice the facelift, and the ear thing makes you pay attention to it so much more. It's odd and makes me uncomfortable, especially because I notice other people looking at it and how uncomfortable she gets. Let's just say I think it was a terrible decision on her part. I had chest implants put in almost 2 years ago. It was one of the best decisions I've made. I had my children young, at 20 and 24. After nursing them, my chest was actually smaller than before I had children, and were essentially pockets of skin. As silly as it may sound, it really wrecked my confidence. I didn't really feel comfortable in form-fitting shirts or swimsuits. I found a really great doctor that I felt comfortable with and had my negative 34A cup enhanced to a full 34C. I didn't realize how uncomfortable I was with my body until after I had surgery. For me, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. If there was one piece of advice I could give to those considering surgery, it would be to interview multiple doctors. Find someone that's talented and on the same page with you as to what you're looking for. In short, I love my fake chest. I have webbed feet and an old girlfriend wanted me to get them cut. I kicked her to the curb. Nobody messes with my groovy mutation. I got a double lid eye surgery. I don't regret it, I think it's actually a major change as the recovery was quite fast. I guess it hasn't really changed me, but I do like my eyes a bit more, though I guess we'll see in a few years. Wait staff. What's the most convoluted order you've ever taken? I always feel bad for the waitress when out to dinner with my mother-in-law. I swear just ordering a glass of water with ice ends up being difficult. Oh, your omelets have 3 eggs? Can you make mine with 1.5? No yolk, just replace the 1.5 yolks with some extra egg white. I swear to frickin' God, I had a woman ask for egg whites, then insist on getting a discount because she wasn't eating the whole egg. If anything, she should be charged extra for wasting egg parts. Not necessarily a convoluted order, but I think it still fits here. I work at a from-scratch Italian restaurant. Had a guy come in with his wife and sit at the bar on a busy Saturday night. He informed me he was following the TB12 diet from Tom Brady's new diet and exercise book, and had very strict dietary restrictions because of this. He sent me back and forth to the kitchen no less than 7 times to verify the chef that his dinner order would have no iodized salt, sugar, olive oil, gluten, peppers, or tomatoes. He ended up with a plain piece of fish and some vegetables. We were getting slammed, but I still tried to keep my patience and accommodate the guy the best I could, even though doing so was putting me in the weeds. After dinner, I asked if they'd like anything else, and don't you know, this guy orders himself a bread pudding, very much filled with forbidden gluten and sugar, and eats the whole thing. He just goes, "Well, I mean, you have to allow yourself a treat every now and again." I died a little more inside. Yeah, he was off that diet by the end of the week, guaranteed. Kinda sounds like he was never on it to begin with. Some confusion arose once because a customer wanted a plain cheeseburger. Brought a cheeseburger with no toppings or condiments. She was very upset. Turns out she wanted a hamburger. My husband has this problem a lot, but opposite. He asks for a plain cheeseburger, and they always bring him a hamburger. We've started saying a plain cheeseburger with cheese. I previously worked at a wing shop. Guy calls and asks for 24 mild traditional wings. He then proceeds to ask for them to be fried twice. No big deal, that's pretty common. He also wants them covered in Mexican shredded cheese, put in the microwave for 30 seconds, drizzled with mayonnaise, and wants his side of fries placed on the wings rather than in a separate container, and demanded the wings be in a pool of mild sauce, which was just short of overflowing the container. Finally, he requested to have pickle juice squeezed lightly across the top of everything. Obviously, all the waiters, cooks, and waitresses thought this was disgusting, but we'd never smelled something so amazing come from the kitchen in our lives. It did not taste as pleasant as it smelled. So I regularly talk about the posts that make me gag, but to be honest, they're generally reserved for medical story compilations. Congratulations, random wings orderer, you made it to the list. Yeah, can I have a Reuben sandwich but with turkey instead of corned beef, no cheese, and no 1000 islands? Can you do mayo instead? Oh, and can I get that on sourdough? Oh, and add stone ground mustard too, please. Of course. Would you still like sauerkraut on your not a Reuben? Coffee frappuccino. Half and half instead of milk, coffee filled up to 2/5 of the cup before blending, light ice, 2 shots espresso, shake ingredients and then blend it 3 times. Use half the bottle of caramel drizzle on the sides of the cup before pouring the drink in. Extra whipped cream, and then add more caramel drizzle to the top. This woman came in every day, watched you make her drink, and would force you to remake it over and over until she was satisfied. She once returned the drink for not having enough caramel drizzle. As I was remaking it, the cap blew off the drizzle bottle, and nearly the entire contents oozed into the cup. It being a frappuccino happy hour, I said, "Screw it," and gave it to her like that. She said it was the best she's ever tasted. The entire store absolutely loathed frappuccinos. I'll just throw mine on yours since it's another Starbucks customer. Venti, heavy whipping cream, 7 pumps of white mocha, 6 pumps caramel flavor, 5 shots, 4 Splenda, 3 sweet and low, extra caramel sauce drizzle, like a quarter of a bottle. She came in every single morning for this abomination, but she tipped really well, so hey, whatever. I serve food at a country club, so I deal entirely with people that have more wealth than I'll probably ever have. A lot of these people are really nice and are actually friendly. However, many are also very snobby, high maintenance, and just rude. One night I had a table. It was 2 couples on a double date, and both couples were less than friendly. One woman ordered a salmon. I can't remember the rest because this one woman was the bane of my existence. I serve them entrees and let them eat for a while before I do the typical, "How's everyone doing?" 9 times out of 10, everyone just says everything's fine and just want me to leave so they can eat. Not this lady. She calls me over and tells me she didn't think I gave her salmon. Looking at her plate, I can see the fish is pink and very clearly salmon. I've served the salmon hundreds of times. She insists I go to the kitchen and ask what fish it was. Of course it's salmon, which I return and tell her politely it's indeed salmon. She gets angry and tells me how it doesn't taste like any salmon she ever had and that she's had salmon many times and that what I served her wasn't salmon. After getting more and more angry about not having salmon, she looks me dead in the eyes and says, "This tastes like turtle." I honestly didn't know how to react, so I just asked if she was sure and she says, "Yes, I actually like it, but it isn't salmon." I'm still blown away by this woman. She got so angry with me about this mix-up. We don't serve turtle. I don't know anywhere that does, and she liked it? I don't understand these people's lives. I had someone order a side of jalapenos to be put on their burger. I bring them out, she looked at them and tells me they're green onions. They were just fresh jalapenos, and the only kind she had apparently ever seen were the pickled ones. I told her they were jalapenos, and she fought me tooth and nail over it. Made me get the manager and still didn't believe them. People amaze me. I'm no waiter, but I do work the food line at my restaurant. The weirdest thing I've seen was a lettuce-wrapped taco with only lettuce in it. A lettuce wrap is a taco shell that's made of lettuce, by the way. I used to work at a burrito joint. Someone ordered a burrito with bean juice but no beans. This one guy ordered spaghetti and meatballs at a restaurant I was a cook for, except he wanted French fries instead of spaghetti noodles. I had a friend who would always order a glass of water with no ice, with some extra lemon slices. Then he'd start making free lemonade at the table. Sometimes there weren't sugar packets at the table already, and I'd die inside when he asked the waiter for sugar packets. By the time we got our food, his warm lemonade was ready, at which point he'd ask for a glass of ice. A half rack of ribs, no sauce, well done, microwaved after taking it off the grill for 5 minutes. 8 sides of Thousand Island dressing to dip it in, broccoli, no butter, triple steamed, a sweet potato with 4 sides of sour cream, a water with no ice, and then 2 cups of ice. Then 15 minutes later decided he wanted another half rack of ribs the same way. This was a year ago, but I will never forget because he snapped at me a ton of times while I was talking to other customers. Then he had the nerve to complain to my manager because his rolls came late, but they'd just been popped into the oven and were baking when he ordered them. Screw that guy. Why is this the second order that specifically requests the freshly cooked food be microwaved? That's a crime against the culinary personnel in my mind. So gross. I once had a woman order her eggs fried hard, scrambled hard. And when I asked her if she wanted her eggs fried or scrambled, as they're 2 completely different ways of making eggs, she had no idea what I was talking about and kept repeating, fried hard, scrambled hard. It took some pressing from both myself and her group to figure out what she wanted. I believe it was scrambled hard. She's kept saying that she's just always ordered fried hard, scrambled hard, and didn't understand our confusion. I bought my own tea bag. Can I have some hot water, please? 5 minutes later, can I have a lemon wedge, please? 2 minutes later, can I have some honey? I hated the ones that wanted to make their own lemonade to try and avoid having to pay for it. We'll have water. Could you bring out a cup of sliced lemons and a bunch of Splendor as well? Not necessarily convoluted, but worked in an Indian restaurant in the UK with a kitchen staff of all Indian people, and lots of people would come in and pretty much detail exactly how they wanted their curry cooked. Like, this is not a jalfrezi, upon being presented with their dish and then explaining to the manager how it should be cooked. I feel like I should point out these were obviously non-Indian people. I had a guy order a chicken korma but make it spicy. After much discussion, the chef agreed to put some chili into it, knowing well that the dish would be weird. A Caesar salad with no croutons, no chicken, no dressing, no bacon, and no cheese. So it was just lettuce. What the frick? Seems like it would be easier at that point to say, I'd just like a bowl of romaine lettuce with lemon squeezed over it. A guy in front of me in the line ordered iced coffee heated up in a microwave. The barista replies, "You mean hot coffee?" To which he replies, I don't know. When I'm home, I make my coffee the night before and put it in the fridge and then microwave it the next morning. That's almost endearing. I hope the barista said something like, well then, prepare to have your mind blown and your coffee experience taken to the next level, and then proceeded to pour him some fresh, hot coffee. Philly cheesesteak sandwich. No cheese, no peppers, no condiments, no bread, no side of fries. She wanted to pay $16 for shredded beef with onions. My daughter was just old enough to go through a buffet alone. She wanted a slice of roast beef and heard people ahead of her ask for medium. She thought, I'm smaller than them, so I don't need a big piece. The guy slicing off portions asked her how she wanted her beef, so she said, small. He just silently gave her a small piece of medium-done roast beef. Eating at an Indian restaurant, I overheard a woman ordering nearby who wanted a curry but steamed veggies, no oil, and no salt. No rice, curry on the side. I have no idea what the kitchen actually made for her. I feel like she doesn't often go to restaurants. Not so much convoluted as stupid. Our wings were breaded and he didn't seem to read that part on the menu. He sent them back because of the extra carbs and ordered a hamburger, no bun, with a side of fries. I didn't really mind this order, but it was very odd and multiple managers came to ask me about it after I put it in and laughed when I showed them. I do all of the Grubhub orders at the restaurant and someone simply ordered 4 lemonades. That's it, for $2.50 each plus the delivery fee. And the go-to drinks aren't very big, and it's just run-of-the-mill lemonade. I really wish I got to deliver the drinks to the person to see what was up with that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A kid asked me for a cheeseburger, but cheese on only half the burger. So half hamburger, half cheeseburger. The parents were a little embarrassed and said I didn't have to humor him, but I liked the cut of his jib. This kid knew what he wanted. I walked the order back to the cook, explained the situation, and the whole kitchen got on board. I used to work at a Steak and Shake, and my favorite customer ever was the kid who ordered a Krabby Patty, and his parents who were silently pleading with me just to go with it. I did, and the kid lit up when he got his order, and it was adorable. When I was a kid, my mum would often do crazy things like go through the drive-thru at McDonald's and ask the people inside to open a can of tuna for her. She was on a weird self-imposed diet. Then when they opened the can of tuna, she would complain that they didn't drain the water correctly. I was just a kid but would basically die from embarrassment in the back seat. I once had an old man send back a plate of hash browns twice because he wanted them burnt to a crisp, like completely blackened. "But of course, sir. Might I also suggest sir just lies on the ground so he can shovel the ashes directly from the fireplace into his gullet? Bon appetit." Not convoluted, but I once had a guy order a pizza with no crust. Okay, like crust cut off? No, like no bread at all. What? We ended up taking a takeout container, putting in sauce, cheese, and pepperoni, heating it up, and they ate it with a spoon. It still haunts me. People that go into length about how they can have absolutely no gluten, then moan and complain when there are no croutons on their salad. Worked in a restaurant that took the gluten allergy really seriously. Lady says she's allergic to gluten and even a crumb will give her issues. Okay, this is a pizza place. So they cleaned the entire area, made the pizza, and brought it out to her. She loves it. Good. Came back 5 minutes later and she's trying a slice of her husband's pizza, which was not gluten-free. I told her that what she's eating isn't gluten-free out of caution and she said, "Well, it's not really an allergy, I just don't want it in my food." Stupid, entitled, bint. I came into a shift where the previous server already had a full section. No problem, you just explain to the guest that you're taking over and to let you know if they need anything. Everything is great, I have one mum and daughter table. The previous server had already taken the order and put it in, so I was basically there to finish them up. Their meals are good and they're enjoying everything. Time to give her the check and she goes, "For future reference, if someone tells you they're low-carbing, you don't give them dates and craisins in their salad." What the frick? The menu is literally right there and it says the salad comes with those things. Granted, I didn't take the order and still apologized to her, but Christ, if you're following a diet, it's your responsibility to be mindful for what you put into your body. We called it the Corey Special because this guy would come in every week and get the exact same thing. Large yum bowl and greens, vegan sub avocado, add cabbage and carrots, half sauce sub nori, add tempeh, no chips, sub crispy noodles on a plate, half rice sub greens. He was a super nice guy though, so no one really minded that he had the order from hell. I used to work as a waiter over the summer. Second day on the job, a group of 20 arrived who had all pre-ordered their meals a month ago for the booking, and no one could remember what they ordered. By some kind of cosmic punishment, I was the only waiter they sent to the group. This happened to me one time also. I had a sheet of paper with people's names and what they ordered for each course, but nobody was wearing name tags and people were too busy talking to listen to their names being called. Luckily, this one lady in the group asks if she can help, so I give her the paper and she starts directing me where to go based on the plates I was holding. She said that she was a waitress before when she was in college and also saw how frustrating the situation was. I brought her a drink before she left. The order itself wasn't particularly difficult, but this lady wanted weak tea, like hot water that has a tea bag put in for a very short amount of time. Simple enough, we're on the same page, right? Problem was, she didn't want me to bring her the hot water and the tea bag, she wanted me to make it for her and to do so perfectly. It took like 6 or 7 tries before she was like, "Now that is some good weak tea." The guy she was eating with was covering his face in shame for being seen with this woman. I wanted to get as far away from her as possible. Since her drink order was so annoying, I was afraid of what her food order would be. Thankfully, she didn't ask for anything special in that department, but I was half expecting to have to heat her food to a very specific temperature or something along those lines. I had a woman once come up and scream at me in front of her full house because I recommended our club sandwich to her husband and he could not finish the sandwich. She stated that I emasculated him and that they'd been coming to our business for a long time and that she couldn't believe he was being treated that way. I know that she was trying to get me to comp the sandwich, but I refused and told her that's why we offered to box food up. They never came back. I rarely, if ever, have been rude to a customer and deep down it bothered me that I was the reason they didn't come back, but at some point you have to take a stand from being taken advantage of. A man with a hangover swore blind that the best cure for said hangover was raw steak. So he ordered raw steak and I served him raw steak and then watched as he ate that raw steak like a famished velociraptor rex. Cook a large flank steak fried in salted butter. Eat that, put on a pair of wet socks, and go to sleep. I cannot for the life of me imagine why consuming raw beef would reduce the likelihood of throwing up. Quite the opposite, actually. But you do you, my self-poisoning boozy wastrel. Worked at a steakhouse very similar to Texas Roadhouse. I had someone order a salad without lettuce. They just wanted a plate with all the different toppings around the edges. Dressing, carrots, cheese, etc. Not as crazy as others, but it still blew my mind. One customer, 2 orders. The first would be paid by card, a cheese and ham toastie with a cup of tea. The ham had to be taken out of the toastie and put in a separate bag, and the toastie had to be cut into quarters and delivered to their table. We don't do that normally. The second part was paid by cash and was a tandoori chicken baguette, cut in half, delivered in 2 separate bags, and a long black with milk and water on the side. Again, we don't do that. Greg's is a tiresome job and customers like that only make it worse. I was a cook for years, but my favorite was this. A waitress ordered a burger and said the customer wanted it between rare and medium. So I said, so they want it medium rare? She went, no, they want it between rare and medium, which initiated a 2-minute discussion between her, another cook, and myself about the fact medium rare is between rare and medium. A medium rare steak with no blood was sent back twice before we gave him a well-done steak. He said it was the best steak he'd ever had in his life. He also didn't tip. I take orders from people who want seafood steamed at my store. I work the seafood counter at a grocery store. Weekends bring the drunks out. They always take about half an hour to figure out what they want and it always ends up being pricey. Last weekend, an intoxicated woman riding one of those scooters meant for the disabled took the cake. She had 2 toddler-sized kids in the scooter basket and a friend walked alongside her. She had me weigh out portions of almost everything in our case. She finally settled on U2 crab legs. She wanted them seasoned and steamed. She couldn't decide what seasoning, so she just told me to mix them all and throw it in there. We have Creole, Old Bay, lemon pepper, and slap your mama. Her ticket came to $99 as those giant crab legs are about $36 a pound. She waited around while I prepared her order. When it was done and packaged, she stood up from her scooter and wobbled toward me to take her package. She said, "Woo, they smell funky. I don't want it no more." And she rode off into the night, leaving behind the vapor of cheap whiskey. I worked at TGI Fridays and waited on some insane woman. She told me she wanted the Parmesan shrimp steak. This was a popular advertised item at Applebee's at the time. I told her that we don't have that, but if she really wants it, there's an Applebee's down the street. She asked if we had anything like that. I told her we have steak and we have grilled shrimp skewers. I told her we didn't have any type of cream sauce and the food wouldn't be exactly like Applebee's. She says fine and orders that. I think everything is fine until the food is brought to her and I kid you not, her face goes white and she looks at me like I just murdered her firstborn. She starts yelling how it's not the Parmesan shrimp steak and that the shrimp were on the side of the plate and not on the steak included. She probably ended up getting the food comped or some crap, since that's how those corporate chain places operate. She ate the whole thing anyway. You could have walked to Applebee's from her table, so either she was insane or just wanted free food. I saw more people get crazy upset about their $10 plate of garbage chain food than you would ever imagine. In short, woman orders an Applebee's menu item at a TGI Fridays. When it wasn't exactly the same, she lost her damn mind. 12 German guys spread out between 3 tables. Perfectly pleasant, though language is a bit of a barrier. They all ordered gammon and chips, cod and chips, burger and chips, etc. A low-alcohol lager each. It was a roadside restaurant. So far, so good. Then for the next hour or so, they would call me over and order another lager there, another there, and a third for this chap. I think it had something like 0.4% alcohol, and they were trying to make up for it to the level of a normal pint. Then, having eaten their meals, they wanted the same again. Only this time, one guy wanted the cod and the other wanted the chips on a separate plate. Ditto the gammon, then desserts. About half of them had a second dessert. Then they wanted to pay separately, not split the bill 12 ways. They wanted to pay for exactly what each of them had. I left the manager with them at the till. Luckily, she spoke German. What's the worst way you've seen a person self-destruct in court? I took my ex to court because she had used my social security number to sign up for cable. I found out about it when she stopped paying for the service. She screwed herself over by just being herself. We showed up to court, I turned in the contract from the cable company, showing my social security number and her own name signed on the contract. She didn't even try to forge my signature. She signed her own name in and tried to deny that she'd had any part in it. The judge tore her apart, and it was nice. Represented a guy that stole 3 trucks from his work. Only 2 were recovered before trial. He showed up to a motion hearing in the 3rd one. I'm doing landlord-tenant cases, and my client was facing eviction over non-payment, but the client was withholding rent payments because of habitability issues in the department. No heat, high lead levels, vermin. This is going to be an easy win for me. I told my client continually to make sure they don't spend the money. Keep it, but don't spend it. Because if you showed the judge you still have the money, it looks really good for you in terms of making the judge believe that you're withholding for good reasons. We get up in front of the judge, the landlord doesn't have an attorney, so I'm dancing inside. There's no way I can lose. I make my arguments and the landlord makes his. Judge asks my client if they still have the money. The client goes, "Nah, I blew that crap at the casino last week." My wife is the lawyer. When children reach the age of majority, if they don't continue studying and start working, it's not necessary to pay alimony. My wife's client found a new lover, which unleashed the wrath of the ex-wife, who started asking for more alimony for her children. Well, to win the case, it was necessary to prove that the children were working, but they could not get any proof of it. There was not much chance of winning, but they still went to court hoping that with the interrogations, they could find information that would put them in evidence. On the day of the trial, the children did not go, only the mother and her lawyer were present. The judge said, "Madam, tell me why your children couldn't come." The mum said, "They couldn't get permission from work." The judge and mother stared at each other for about a minute in awkward silence. Then the judge said, "Well, that was fast." I should note that the topic of this story grouping was, what was the worst way you saw a person screw over someone else in court? But so far, every single story I've read has been clients self-screwing. But don't be surprised if the original context rears its head at some point. I had a client who was trying to get away from a psycho ex and filed for a restraining order. He shows up to the final hearing and is making a big fuss about a truck they brought during their marriage. He said it was just his and she had no rights to it because their marriage was void. I asked him on cross-examination what he meant by that, and he said that he had already been married in another state when he married my client. He said that my client had no idea, but that it means that their marriage is invalid and the truck was all his. Not only is that legally inaccurate, the transcript of the hearing was promptly turned over to the police, who were actively investigating him for bigamy. Oh, and the judge gave my client the truck along with a 2-year no-contact order. A friend kept meticulous records of how much time his estranged wife spent with their daughter. He used pink highlighter for mum and blue highlighter for himself. Mum sailed into arbitration demanding full custody and handsome child support and the house. Dad pulled out 3 years' worth of year-long calendars. Mum had spent less than a full month with the child in 3 years. I can tell you she wasn't happy with the outcome. This might be a dumb question, but how are the calendars verified to be true? You'd be surprised. Not divorce-related, but a previous co-worker, we're civil engineers, had a case where the only thing that made it not a he-said-she-said situation was that he kept a phone log with short summaries of what was decided. It was basically, "He's got a log that he's willing to swear by was written the day of the call that says you approved this change. Do you have anything to the opposite?" I'm a lawyer. I saw someone screw themselves. I work as a public servant in a criminal law judge's office, and since I have a law degree, I don't normally do administrative work, though I get to be with the judge in some of the hearings. Last month we had a huge substance trafficking case. I'm talking about 20 or more people involved, months of investigation, undercover agents, videos, audio, the whole ordeal. The hearing lasted 3 days. Anyway, when it was time for one of the defendants to be on the stand so the prosecutor could read the charges he was accusing him of, he was pleading not guilty, as he very loudly stated from the majority of the hearing up until my boss, the judge, told him to shut up or he would be admonished, to which he replied, "What are you going to do, arrest me?" Which, to be honest, was actually a bit funny. The prosecutor, as part of the facts of his case, told him that he was being accused of selling, trafficking, and carrying X amount of X substances, with the base of his operation being his house, where he lived with his partner. Mind you, said partner wasn't even in the hearing. She wasn't arrested or anything, as there was nothing tying her to the case. And the defendant said, "Wait up. I was the one selling the substances. She didn't do anything." His lawyer, a state-assigned public lawyer, facepalmed so hard it's actually recorded in the audio of the hearing. A witness for the plaintiff in a civil suit, who was a co-worker of the plaintiff, testified very strongly against the company and in favor of the plaintiff. I questioned her about bias towards the plaintiff, if they knew each other well and were friends, etc. She said no, just friendly co-workers, work friends at best. I pinned her to it. When I got a chance to cross-examine the plaintiff, she had no choice but to burn her witness's credibility because not only were they very close friends, but they'd become sisters-in-law just a few years before. No, they didn't have the same last name or anything, but I'd done my homework. I still don't get why people want to fight small bias by destroying their credibility, but it happens more than you'd think. I'm being sparse on the details here due to confidentiality, but I had a client who was accused of very nasty offenses at work. He had an alibi. He was at work where he was the boss. He had an employee who could absolutely vouch for his being there. I talked to the employee, and the employee confirmed this. It gets closer to the trial, around the time when I need to send an alibi notice, which is advance notice to the Crown so that they can investigate the alibi and determine whether or not it's true. But I'm being careful, so I call the employee up again. It turns out my client fired him in the interim, so the employee quite candidly tells me, the lawyer, "Oh yeah, he was definitely at work, but that's not what I'm going to say in court. Screw that guy, he's going down." I didn't call him as a witness or file the alibi notice. I still won the trial, but if I hadn't thought to call the guy or if he'd been less candid, my client would have been screwed really bad. He would have been on the offender registry, had jail time, the works, completely innocent. Wait, he was the boss and stupid enough to fire his alibi witness before the trial? My God. From talking to the employee, I'm guessing he sorely deserved the firing. That said, people accused of crimes might not be the brightest, but even the smart ones often make some dumb mistakes. I mean, a lot of people with illegal content on their laptop get caught because they take their computer in to get fixed and don't think, hey, I'm handing off evidence of very serious crimes to a random stranger. The narrator is certain that due to both his inability to lie and tendency to immediately say the least appropriate thing in any given social context, he would end up in one of these stories if he ever did a serious crime, and then maybe someone will narrate my court case on this channel. Too many criminal client situations to count of them screwing themselves over. One of the very few family law cases I handled as a young attorney sticks out to me though. A young woman and a young man have a child. The young woman seeks divorce from young man because he enjoys the thug life. He had recently been arrested and charged for possession with intent to distribute crystal, a felony, and in possession of a firearm, unlawful carry. The young man doesn't like her leaving him. He hires a local big-name top divorce attorney, granted very rural area, gets a temporary divorce order entered saying she can't have overnight male guests. This is actually more common than you would think in conservative areas. I think it's mostly a thing of the past in more urban places. The young woman starts seeing someone new. The young man is very upset about this. He has his fancy lawyer ask for a hearing, accusing her of violating court order and seeking full custody on top of attorney fees. The young woman, on advice from a mutual friend, hires me for this hearing. I sit down with the opposing counsel, and she's basically trying to strong-arm me with her experience and lays out egregious terms. The mother must not only give up her primary custody, but must have visitation with a supervisor and pay child support and attorney fees. She knows I'm a new baby attorney in town, fairly certain that I'd been licensed for less than a year. I balk, and she says she'll see us in court. I go into the hearing with a copy of his probation arrangement with his possible intent to sell and unlawful carry. He hasn't even told his attorney about this, and she is unaware. She calls him up and establishes how my client had her new boyfriend over on X, Y, and Z nights. The judge is very conservative and not pleased about this. Then the opposing counsel passes the witness. I ask him if he has a job. No. What do you do for money? Things here and there. Oh? Miss opposing counsel is awfully expensive. Do you sell crystal? What? Have you ever sold substances to make ends meet? No. Introduces a copy of his guilty plea and straight probation sentencing. The judge is now staring daggers at him. I lean over to my client sitting next to me and whisper, "If you took a substance test today, be honest, would you be completely clean?" She says yes. I ask the young man, "When was the last time you did crystal?" His attorney objects, but the judge overrules. I know this judge will do substance tests on people on the spot, as he's also the misdemeanor substance court judge. It's been years, I'm clean now. So if you were tested, you'd be clean? Yes. The opposing counsel asks the same of my client, and we agree. The judge has them both tested. The guy tests positive for crystal. My client is clean. The judge denies his motion and asks me to send in new temporary orders where the young man is required to maintain employment and start paying child support, and places the man on supervised visits. Icing on the cake, the opposing counsel actually calls me and leaves me a voicemail congratulating me on, and I quote, handing her butt to her for the first time in a very long time. That last part is nice. Your opponent didn't take it very personally and even showed respect. Nice. I've probably been very lucky in my career that very few opposing counsel, be they for the state or in minor civil matters, I try to avoid civil these days though, take things personally with me. I'm a very jovial guy and I try to get to know them over the course of cases. There is one prosecutor I currently have cases with where we may argue cases and issues, but between being before the bench, we share our respective latest cool D&D moments. We both DM games. Just recently, he and I had one of our last cases on the docket and we were discussing said sessions, and the judge had to interrupt us and say, "If I could get you nerds to stop for a second and do this motion, that'd be nice. I'd like to go to lunch." Huh, the laughs were had. Lawyers that take things personally or get personal with opposing counsel are crappy lawyers and don't belong in the profession. But that's just my opinion, man. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This was a case another prosecutor in my office had a few years back. A 30-year-old defendant was charged with the unspeakable act after he got his girlfriend's sister pregnant. She actually kept the baby, so the police just waited and got a paternity test. No surprise, defendant was the father. Defendant wanted probation. Prosecutor refused to offer it. He decided to plead guilty and have a jury trial on punishment. Here in Texas, you can choose to have the jury set the punishment. Evidence mostly proceeded as expected. The victim testified to having consensual, aside from being old enough to consent, whoopee with the defendant, getting pregnant, among other things. Paternity test was introduced. The defendant took the stand. His version of events was that he snuck into the victim's room at night, covered her mouth, and held her down while he committed the unspeakable act. It seemed like his own lawyer had no idea that that's the story he was going to go with. The jury deliberated for about 15 minutes before returning a verdict of 17 years. The maximum possible charge was 20. When interviewed by the attorneys afterwards, one of them said they decided on 17 years so the defendant would never forget the age of consent in Texas again. So a group of friends and I rented a 5-bedroom house in college. And being the group of guys we were, we partied pretty hard and were really rough on the house. We knew going in we were not getting our deposit back. Well, partway through living there, the septic started to have some problems. Whenever someone used the downstairs shower, it would drain pretty slowly, basically filling up the basin as you used it. Also, one of the room's carpets would get wet, so we emailed the property service to fix it. 2 weeks later, they sent out a plumber to snake the line and leave. Well, that didn't fix it, so we emailed again. 2 to 3 weeks, plumber, snake, leave. Still not fixed, email, and about 2 to 3 weeks and they scoop the line. Turns out roots had grown into the line, so they had to do a big old process to completely remove all the roots. Now it's fixed. Well, we all move out and go our separate ways. One of my buddies goes to Australia for 9 months. When he gets back, he comes home to a bunch of voicemails. Turns out the property company is coming after us for like $5,000 on top of the deposit. They tried to pressure him into either paying the money or he'd be taken to court. He told them he'd see them in court. For the couple of months leading up to the court date, he'd get calls telling him to pay and it would all go away. The day before the first day of court, they call him and tell him to pay $2,000 and give them info for one of the other people living on the original lease. He says to go to heck and see you in court. The first day of court is just to make sure everyone knows and to schedule the actual case. The lawyer for the property company shows up, is scrambling to figure out what's going on. He had no records beyond the original lease, which changed a couple of times as people moved in and out. My buddy helps him out by giving him copies of the multiple emails that we sent them to fix the septic and the damage it did to the house. Told my buddy he'd let us know how they wanted to proceed, and we never heard from the company again. Gotta love a justice against crappy landlord story. Keep records of your interactions with the people who own your property and photos, folks. You never know when they'll help you. Someone I knew had a pro Dio case where she had to defend a person who had been charged with a criminal offense. I don't know what, confidential and, Even though the police and DA could pretty much pinpoint the crime to her client, there was no evidence to tie him to the crime. Circumstantial at best. She'd instructed him to shut up and let her do the talking during the trial. As from experience, the client sometimes doesn't know how to answer a question properly. She pleads and can show that the court has nothing on her client. She feels that for once, a pro Dio case is going her way. After her plea, the judge thanks her for her plea and turns to the client. He asks if the client's had something to add to the plea. The client looks at her, back at the judge, tears well up in his eyes, and he blurts out, "I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again." She threw her notes and everything else she had in her hands at the client, now convict apparently. She basically got screwed by her own client who screwed himself even worse. Well, not my story, but a prior boss's story. They had a drunk driver kills a car worth of people case at the time where they were a general practitioner. My boss was representing the family that got hit, of which only the father was alive, and wanted the college guy's drunk driving skin to be mounted on a wall. This was back before Facebook was commonly used in court proceedings and before tons of people realized that crap is too great for any attorney worth their weight in salt to pass up. So, the drunk driving college kid had managed to get the judge's sympathy during the first part of the hearing by saying he was sorry, haunted, and never going to drink again. This was going to ruin his life. The judge seemed to be eating it up. Then comes my boss, who immediately burns this kid's remorse story to the ground by showing numerous Facebook statuses and photos of them binge drinking, partying, and even joking about driving drunk from the date of the accident up until a night ago. The kid looked like he was being forced to swallow hot coals, and the judge was absolutely livid. Needless to say, the kid had to do way more than just apologize and be remorseful after that. My dad was the equivalent of a public defender decades ago. There was this guy that would get caught for being drunk in public lewdness, etc. every weekend. He seemed to draw the same judges and was pretty well known to everyone in the courthouse as an absolute lost cause. One of the regular judges had him appear in his court again. The judge is ready to give him a prison sentence because he was driving a car this time. But the guy starts crying that he finally got a job out of town and was trying to turn his life around. The judge tells him that as long as he never makes a mistake in my town again, he would just drop the charges. Well, sure as heck, this guy shows up the following Monday. Same judge, driving drunk again. My dad now has his case. The judge tells him he gave him his final chance, to which the guy sobs and replies, "I was leaving town, Your Honor, but my friend decided to throw me a going-away party." The judge was not amused. My dad had to do everything he could not to laugh. In short, perpetual drunk that drove, gets a chance to leave town and not face charges, but gets drunk at a going-away party in his honor, drives and goes to jail. Faced the same judge both times. I'm currently representing a sweet old lady on a case. I'll be sparse in details in case anyone figures out who I am. Long story short, this lady's neighbor convinces her that her house is basically unsellable, that her house requires all sorts of repairs, the repairs to the house would bankrupt her, and that she should just sell the house. To him. He shows up at her house the next day with documents to sign. She has no idea what's going on and doesn't read anything. She actually has an eye condition and signs everything. When she finally sees a lawyer to close the deal, he says, "What the frick, you can't do this." You see, the price of the transaction was about 36% of what the house was actually worth, and there weren't any repairs that needed to be done that would justify the price. Not kidding, it was stuff like fixing a faucet in the bathroom. Also, she didn't understand that she would have nowhere to live afterwards. The old lady thought she could just stay in the house until she died. To make matters worse, she's living off a modest pension and the other side is suing her for the house. They're essentially trying to get her to cave because her legal fees are getting exorbitant. I hate people. To answer a few questions. 1. We do have a lot in our favor, but there are a lot of steps to get to trial. By the time we get there, she's going to have to spend a lot of money. Money she doesn't have. 2. She has an eye condition. Uveitis, but it isn't bad enough to qualify as a defense, non est factum. At the time, she was driving. 3. She's a terrible witness. Her evidence is all over the place. When she was examined, deposed for you Americans, she denied being taken advantage of. That's not great for our position. 4. In Ontario, where I practice, contracts for purchase of real estate don't have to be notarized. This comes later, I just thought I'd provide a quick update. We literally just settled this afternoon, so my client can live in peace. In a little more debt than before, but nothing that will bankrupt her. As much as there are some evil lawyers in the world, I guess we do at least need a couple like this man or woman to do the good work in cases like this against evil exploitative monsters like the neighbor in this story. I was litigating a custody dispute on behalf of the mother in an incredibly conservative jurisdiction. One of the most common ways to get custody was to allege an addiction to adult content or just doing the deed, because the threshold for it was basically non-existent. For this hearing, however, we lucked out with the judge who I knew from other cases. Opposing counsel tried to gotcha me into settling before the hearing by showing me surprise messages of an adult nature between the mum and her new boyfriend. This is, of course, not law and order, and you can't introduce surprise evidence. So we go through the hearing, I object to the messages, but say I'd allow them to be read into the record in their entirety. So the uptight, very conservative local attorney gets to spend the next 25 minutes or so reading these messages in open court, occasionally asking if she could gloss over parts, but no, I didn't feel it would be appropriate to gloss over them as there's a woman's livelihood in the balance. I'll never forget hearing her struggle with certain words. They weren't even dirty. But this was like the third hearing we had to amend custody because this guy felt like his ex-wife having a boyfriend meant that she was an addict to doing the deed. They alleged the messages happened while the kid was in the mum's custody, but they based that on the timestamp of the screenshots. The timestamp on the texts was clearly at a time when the kid was not even around, and mum was safe to do the deed over the phone. The judge had heard enough of this bullcrap and awarded attorney's fees and put in the order, consistent with the vexatious litigant statute, that the dad would continue to be liable for her attorney's fees if he kept pushing this crap. It was the only joy I got from practicing family law. I sat on the jury of a man who was accused of very inappropriate behavior with children. He elected to testify in his own defenses, and his defense was, "I did it, but it was her idea." It was his third felony strike, so he'll be spending, with any luck, the rest of his life in prison. This wasn't court, but a live Portland traffic stop I was watching, and the guy told the officer, "I have caffeine pills in my back pocket," gets them out and puts them on the hood, and everyone's chill. The guy then just comes clean of its own accord and says it's Molly, and the officers look at each other and go, "Do we even have a test kit for that?" And the officer says, "No." The guy's face just shows he should have kept his mouth shut. Sitting waiting for my client, and the judge is giving a mass colloquy for an alternative program on a DUI, basically probation. The question was, has anyone consumed alcohol or taken drugs in the last 24 hours? The obvious answer aside, one guy proudly raises his hand. "I did smack last night." He did not get probation. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.